He didn't hesitate. The enemy sniper watched Petty Officer Ryan Mitchell reach out to drag his wounded brother behind the rocks, and he let him get halfway. Then he fired. One shot. Not to kill, to cripple hope. The round punched the dirt an inch from Mitchell's hand, and the message was clear as a spoken threat. You will die slowly, and I will decide when. That was the Spectre unit. They didn't just kill men, they played with them. Before we go on, if you believe courage doesn't come from muscles, but from a calm mind under fire, subscribe to this channel and stay with me all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels tonight. Chief Petty Officer Mark Daniels had been in the Navy for 19 years, and in 19 years he had learned exactly one thing about fear. Fear was quiet. Real fear didn't scream. It didn't make a man shout or panic or run. Real fear pressed a man flat against the earth and made him listen to his own heartbeat and made him wonder if the enemy could hear it too. He was listening to it now. Mitchell, he whispered. Mitchell, do not move again. You hear me? Do not move. I got you, Chief, Mitchell whispered back, and his voice was shaking, and he was trying so hard not to let it shake that the effort made it worse. I got you. I'm not going anywhere. They were pinned in a ditch that wasn't even a real ditch. It was a shallow gouge in the valley floor, a scar in the dirt, maybe 2 feet deep, and it was the only thing keeping them alive. Every few minutes, a round would come in. Not a spray, not a burst. One round, patient, deliberate. It would strike the lip of the ditch and spray them with grit and stone. And then there would be silence again, and the silence was worse than the shooting. Chief, how many are there? Mitchell asked. How many you think doesn't matter? It matters to me. Daniels closed his eyes for a second. He thought about lying. He thought about telling the kid it was one guy, just one lucky shooter, and that the second they got support, the whole thing would be over. But Mitchell was 23 years old, and he wasn't stupid, and lying to a scared man was a way of disrespecting him. 2, Daniel said, maybe 3, and they're good. They're the best I've ever seen. Mitchell let out a breath that was almost a laugh. That's real comforting, Chief. You asked. The rest of Alpha Platoon was scattered across 200 yards of open valley, tucked behind whatever the land offered. A boulder here, a dry creek bed there, a fold in the earth that a man could press himself into and pray. They had walked into this valley at dawn on a routine patrol, a nothing patrol, a check the village and be home by lunch patrol. And somewhere between the first step and the third, the entire world had gone wrong. The first man down had been Corporal Reyes. He'd been walking point, and he'd turned to say something nobody would ever know what, and a round had taken him through the throat before the sound of the shot even reached them. He had dropped without a word, and that was the thing that still had Daniel's hands cold. There had been no warning, no crack of a rifle, no whistle of a round, just Reyes talking, and then Reyes not talking. And then the whole platoon realizing at the same terrible instant that they were standing in the open in front of ghosts. Alpha, this is Daniels, he said into his radio low and flat. Anybody got eyes on the shooters? Anybody talk to me? The radio crackled. Chief, this is Doc. I'm with Reyes. He's gone, Chief. I know, Doc. Stay down. You stay down, you hear me? You do not stand up for him. He wouldn't want you dying to hold his hand. Copy, Doc said, and his voice broke on the word. Another shot. This one hit the boulder where 2 of the machine gunners were hiding, and it hit low, and it hit exactly where a man's ankle would be if he weren't careful about how he tucked himself in. Daniels heard someone curse sharp and surprised, and then he heard the machine gunner scramble tighter into cover. That was what got to him. That was what made his stomach turn to ice. These shooters weren't just shooting at cover. They were shooting at the specific weaknesses in the cover. They knew exactly where a man's foot would be, exactly where his shoulder would peek out, exactly where the shadow got thin. They were reading Alpha Platoon like a book they'd already finished. Chief, Mitchell whispered. Chief, I gotta tell you something. Don't. I got a daughter coming. Amber's due in October. I never told anybody yet. Mitchell, I swear to God, if you start saying goodbye to me, I'm gonna shoot you myself. I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying I got a reason. I'm saying I'm not dying in this ditch. I got a reason not to. Daniels turned his head slow and careful and looked at the kid. Mitchell's face was streaked with dust, and there was a cut over his eyebrow, and his eyes were bright and wet and absolutely furious. And Daniels felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. This scared, shaking 23-year-old was not giving up. He was digging in. Good, Daniel said. Then hold that. Hold on to Amber, and do not move. 200 yards away, tucked behind the creek bed, the platoon's radio man was screaming into his handset. His name was Foster, and he was trying to raise anybody at all who could get them out of this. Higher command, the nearest fire base, a passing aircraft, God himself. Any station, any station. This is Alpha Platoon. We are in contact. We are pinned. We have casualties. We need immediate support. How copy over? The answer came back scratchy and calm and far away. Alpha, this is Overlord. We hear you. What has your situation over? Our situation is we're dying, William, Foster said, and then caught himself. Overlord, we are pinned by enemy snipers. We cannot move. We cannot maneuver. Every time we try to reposition, we take fire. We have 1 KIA. We have wounded. We need suppression. We need air. We need something over. There was a pause. In war, pauses cost lives, and Foster hated every second of it. Alpha, be advised, Overlord said. We cannot authorize an airstrike on your position. You're too close to the target area. We drop ordnance there. We're going to kill your own people. Do you understand me, Over? Foster closed his eyes. Understood, Overlord. So what do we do? Stand by, Alpha. We're working a solution. Keep your heads down. Keep your heads down, as if they were doing anything else, as if any man in Alpha Platoon had lifted his head more than an inch in the last hour. They can't help us, Foster said into the radio net so the whole platoon could hear it. No air. We're too close. They were working a solution. Daniels heard that, and he understood it, and he hated it, but he understood it. He'd been on the other side of that call before. He'd been the man who had to tell a pinned unit that no, he couldn't drop a bomb on the enemy because the bomb would land on them too. It was the kind of decision that aged a man 10 years in 10 seconds. Working a solution, Mitchell repeated bitterly. You know what that means, Chief. That means we're the solution. That means somebody's got to come do this by hand. Somebody will. Who's crazy enough? Daniels didn't answer because he didn't know, but he knew the truth of what Mitchell had said. Machines couldn't save them. Bombs couldn't save them. The only thing that could untangle this valley, the only thing that could beat a sniper, was another sniper, a better one, a calmer one. And Daniels had no idea if a person like that even existed within 100 miles of this godforsaken place. He was wrong. She was already moving. High on the ridge above the valley, so far up that the men in the ditch looked like scattered stones, Lieutenant Emily Carter was flat on her belly in the dirt, and she had been there for 40 minutes, and she had not fired a single shot. Her spotter, a lean, quiet man named Wallace, lay beside her, glassing the valley through a spotting scope, reading the land inch by inch. Talk to me, ma'am, Wallace said. What are you seeing? I'm not seeing anything, Emily said. That's the point. What's the point? The point is that a battlefield is never empty. If I'm looking at an empty valley, I'm not looking hard enough. There's men down there killing our people, and they haven't fired at us, which means they don't know we're here, which means they're focused. Focused men make patterns. I just have to find the pattern. Wallace had worked with a lot of shooters over the years, and most of them were hunters at heart. They wanted the shot. They itched for it. They'd take a 50% chance just to feel the recoil. Carter was not like that. Carter was patient in a way that unnerved him. She would lie in the dirt for hours and not blink. She treated a rifle the way a surgeon treated a scalpel, as a thing you did not touch until you were absolutely certain. You ever seen a unit like this, he asked. No, she admitted. I've seen good snipers. I've never seen a coordinated cell that shoots like this. Look at the pattern of hits. Look at where they're striking. Wallace looked. They're not trying to kill everybody, Emily said quietly. If they wanted to kill everybody, half those men would already be dead. They're hurting them. Every shot is pushing our guys tighter into cover, keeping them frozen, keeping them from moving. That's not bloodlust. That's control. Somebody down there is very, very patient and very, very smart, and they are enjoying this. The word enjoying sat in the air between them like something poisonous. So what do we do? Wallace asked. We do what they're doing, Emily said. We wait, we watch, and we do not fire until we know exactly what we're firing at, because the second we shoot, we announce ourselves. The second we shoot, we go from hunters to prey. So we get it right the first time. We do not miss. Missing is the same as dying up here. You understand, I understand. Down in the ditch, Daniels was having a very different conversation with the enemy, and the enemy didn't know it, and the enemy would never hear it. You think you're smart, he whispered into the dirt so quiet that even Mitchell couldn't hear. You think you've got us. You think we're just meat waiting for you. But I've been doing this a long time, friend, and somebody always comes. Somebody always comes for the men who play games. He didn't believe it, not fully, but he said it anyway because saying it kept the cold out of his chest. And keeping the cold out of his chest kept him thinking, and thinking was the only weapon he had left. Another shot came in. This one was different. This one didn't hit cover at all. It hit the open ground in the center of the valley right beside the body of Corporal Reyes, and it kicked up a spray of dust across the dead man's chest. Daniels felt his jaw tighten until his teeth ached. "Chief," Mitchell breathed. Did they just shoot Reyes? He's already dead. Why would they? Because they want us to know they can, Daniel said, and his voice was flat and terrible. They want us to know they see everything. They want us watching a dead man get shot so we understand there's nothing we can do. That's sick. That's the point. Fear's a weapon, Mitchell, and these people are experts with it. Up on the ridge, Emily saw the same shot, and she saw the spray of dust across the dead man's body, and she went very still. Something changed in her face. Wallace didn't see it, but he felt it, the way you feel the temperature drop before a storm. "They just shot a corpse," she said quietly. "Yeah, I saw." "That's a mistake." "How is that a mistake? That's just cruel." "It's a mistake because it's arrogance," Emily said. A patient man doesn't waste around to be cruel. A patient man conserves. That shot told me something. That shot told me they think they have already won. And a man who thinks he's already won stops being careful. He starts performing, he starts showing off. And a man who shows off is a man who exposes himself. She adjusted the rifle a fraction of an inch. "Wallace, watch the ridgeline northeast of the platoon. The little saddle between the two rock formations, right about where the shadow gets thin." "Why there?" "Because that's where I'd be." Wallace swung the spotting scope. He studied the saddle. He saw nothing. Rocks, dust. A camouflage net, if it was there, was invisible against the terrain, blending so perfectly that even at high magnification it looked like more of the same broken ground. "I got nothing, ma'am. It's empty." "It's not empty. It's the best position on the whole battlefield. Overwatch of the entire valley. Good backdrop, no skyline behind it. If I were running that cell, that's my #1 shooter's nest, and I would defend it with my life." She breathed slow. "We watch it. We wait for something to change. Anything. A shadow that moves wrong, a shimmer that shouldn't shimmer, dust that lifts when there's no wind." Down below, Mitchell was starting to crack just a little at the edges. Not from fear anymore. From the waiting. The waiting was its own kind of torture, and he'd been holding still for so long that his muscles had started to cramp and his mind had started to run in circles. "Chief, I can't feel my leg," he whispered. "I've been in the same position so long I can't feel my leg. If I have to move fast, I don't know if I can." "You won't have to move fast." "You don't know that." "I know that if you move at all, you die. So you're not moving. So it doesn't matter that your leg's asleep. You understand me? Your leg is not the problem. Your leg being awake and getting you killed, that would be the problem." Mitchell almost laughed. Almost. "That's twisted logic, Chief. It's kept me alive 19 years. There was a long silence. The kind of silence that had teeth now because they all knew that silence was when the shooters were working. Silence meant a scope was being adjusted somewhere. Silence meant a finger was settling on a trigger. Silence in that valley was the sound of death getting comfortable. And then Foster came back on the net, and his voice had changed. There was something in it that hadn't been there before. Hope. Careful, fragile hope. "Alpha, all stations be advised. Overlord says we've got overwatch. We've got a shooter up on the high ridge. SEAL element. Call sign Reaper. Repeat, we have friendly overwatch on station." Daniels felt his heart do something complicated. Relief and fear all tangled together. "A shooter," Mitchell said. "One shooter. One shooter against those things down there. One's all it takes," Daniel said, if it's the right one. "You believe that?" Daniels thought about it. He thought about all the men he'd known who could shoot and the very few who could truly do the work, the thinking work, the patient, impossible work of beating a sniper at his own game. I want to believe it, he said finally. Right now, that's the best I got. Foster's voice again. Reaper, this is Alpha. Do you copy over? And then a new voice came over the net. A woman's voice. Calm, level, so calm it was almost strange given everything that was happening, given the bodies and the blood and the fear thick as smoke over the whole valley. Alpha, this is Reaper. I copy. I'm on the high ridge. I have eyes on your position and eyes on the valley. I need everybody to do exactly one thing for me. I need you to hold still and stop trying to move. Every time you move, you give them a target and you give me noise I have to filter out. So freeze. Let me work. Can you do that for me over? There was a pause on the net, and then Daniels keyed his radio and he heard himself say the words. Reaper, this is Chief Daniels. It's a woman. That's a woman's voice. That's affirmative, Chief, she said, and there was the faintest, driest edge of humor in it. That a problem? Daniels looked at the dead body of Corporal Reyes lying in the open. He looked at Mitchell's dust-streaked, furious, hopeful face. He thought about Amber, who was due in October, who might grow up without a father because of the men down in that valley. No, ma'am, he said, that is not a problem. That is the best news I've heard all day. You just tell me what you need. I need you to hold still, Emily said. That's all. Hold still and trust me. I've got you. I've got you. 3 words. And somehow coming from that calm, faraway voice on the high ridge, they landed in the ditch like a hand on Daniel's shoulder. He didn't know this woman. He'd never met her. He had no reason on earth to trust her. And he trusted her completely in that moment because there was nothing else to do and because her voice held not one single tremor of doubt. You heard her, Daniel said into the net. All stations Alpha Actual. Freeze. Nobody moves. Nobody. We let Reaper work. Hold what you got. Up on the ridge, Emily let the radio go quiet, and she settled back into the rifle, and she let the whole world narrow down to the eye at the scope in the valley beyond it. They're trusting you, Wallace murmured. All those men down there, they're putting their lives in your hands right now. I know. How do you not feel that, the weight of it? How are you so calm? Emily was silent for a moment. When she spoke, it was quiet and it was honest in a way she rarely let herself be. I feel it, she said. I feel every ounce of it. But the second I let it into my hands start to shake. And shaking hands miss, and a miss down there gets one of those men killed. So I take the weight, Wallace, and I set it down over there. She nodded very slightly, as if toward a spot in the air beside her. I set it down where I can see it, but where it can't touch the rifle. And I pick it back up again when the work is done. That's the whole job. That's the only trick there is. Wallace stared at her for a second. Then he went back to the scope. There, Emily said suddenly, very softly. There it is. The saddle. Watch the left edge low where the 2 shadows meet. Tell me what you see. Wallace focused everything he had on that spot. And this time he saw it. It was almost nothing. It was less than nothing. It was a single thread of heat shimmer, a wavering in the air that was just slightly wrong, just slightly out of rhythm, with the rest of the heat rising off the valley floor. I see, I think I see. Ma'am, is that? That's breath. That's a man breathing under a net. That's a man breathing under a net, Emily confirmed. That's the reason nobody's found them. They're not hiding their bodies. They're not hiding their rifles. Anybody can do that. They're managing their own heat. They're breathing slow and shallow so their thermal signature stays flat. That's discipline. That's the discipline of somebody who's been doing this for years and years. A pause, which means they're going to be very hard to kill. But it also means they're human. And humans breathe. And breathing moves the air. And moving air is a thing I can see. So, do we take the shot? No, not yet. I only have a shimmer. I don't have a body. I don't have a head. I fire at a shimmer and I miss, and then they know exactly where we are. And then we're the ones getting shot at. We need him to expose himself. We need him to move. And he won't move for nothing. So we're going to give him a reason to move. How? We're going to lie to him, Emily said. We're going to make him believe something that isn't true, and he's going to react to it, and the reaction is going to cost him. Down in the ditch, Mitchell had gone quiet, and the quiet worried Daniels more than the talking had. Mitchell, you with me? I'm with you, Chief. I'm thinking about Amber. I'm thinking about how I never even got to see her. She's just a picture on a screen right now, just a little gray shape on Sarah's phone. You're gonna see her. You don't know that. I keep telling you I don't know a lot of things, but I know men. And I've been listening to that woman on the radio for 5 minutes, and I'm telling you something, Mitchell. I've heard 100 people talk on a radio in a firefight, and 99 of them, you can hear the fear underneath. You can hear it no matter how hard they try to hide it. It's there. It's always there. He paused. Not her. Her voice is flat as a table. And a person whose voice is flat as a table in the middle of all this, that's not a normal person, Mitchell. That's somebody who's been to hell and back so many times she's got a frequent visitor card. That's who's up there looking out for us. So yeah, you're going to see Amber. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, thanks, Chief. Don't thank me. Just hold still. On the ridge, Emily was building her lie. Wallace, I need you to get on the net with the platoon. Quietly, I need the machine gun team behind that boulder to do exactly one thing. I need them to shove a helmet up over the top of their cover real slow, like a man carefully trying to peek out. Not fast, slow. Slow like a scared man who thinks he can get away with it. And I need them to do it exactly where I tell them, and then I need them to yank it back down the instant I say. Wallace understood immediately. You want to draw a shot? I want to draw a shot. Our friend in the saddle has been shooting anybody who peeks. It's his whole game. He can't help himself. Somebody exposes, he engages. It's a reflex now, so we give him a nice, slow, juicy target, and when he takes the shot, he has to settle, he has to hold, he has to commit for just a fraction of a second longer than he's used to. And in that fraction of a second, he's going to lift his head just a hair to confirm the hit. Because he's proud, because he always confirms. And that hair of a lift is all I need. That's a hell of a plan, ma'am. That's a hell of a lot of things that have to go right. Everything up here is a lot of things that have to go right, Emily said. That's the job. She keyed her radio low and calm. Ofa, this is Reaper. I need the machine gun team on the North Boulder. You copy, a new voice tight and young. Reaper, this is Corporal Vance machine gun team, we copy. Vance, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me, even though it's going to feel insane. You still have your spare helmet, the one off your assistant gunner. Affirmative. Here's what I need. Put it on the end of your barrel or a stick, anything, and I need you to raise it up over the left edge of your cover real slow when I give you the word. Left edge, nice and slow, like a man trying to sneak a look. And the second I say down, you rip it back down as fast as you can move. Can you do that? There was a pause. Reaper, respectfully, you want me to make somebody shoot at us. I want to make him shoot at a helmet Vance. Not at you, not at your head, at a piece of empty steel on a stick. And when he does, I'm going to end him. But I need him to shoot to make that happen. You following me? Another pause. Then quietly, copy Reaper, left edge, slow up fast down, on your word. Good man, stand by. Daniels heard the whole exchange and he understood exactly what was about to happen and his mouth had gone dry. She's baiting them, he whispered to Mitchell. She's using a helmet to draw a shot, so she can find them. That's crazy. That's brilliant. That's terrifying, but that's brilliant. He shook his head slowly in the dirt. 19 years, Mitchell. 19 years, and I never would have thought of that under this kind of pressure. I'd be too busy trying to keep everybody alive to think 3 moves ahead. She's up there playing chess. We're all down here just trying not to lose the pieces, and she's playing chess. Up on the ridge, Emily breathed. She let her heart rate slow. She let the world go quiet. She was aware of Wallace beside her, aware of the rifle against her cheek, aware of the shimmer in the saddle. 600, 800. No, she read the wind. She read the mirage. She made the range in her head and refined it again. 1,100 yards. Give her or take. She dialed her adjustments with hands that did not shake at all. Wallace, wind. Full value left to right. I'm reading maybe 8 gusting to 12. It's inconsistent, ma'am. It's swirling in that valley. I know it's swirling. That's the hard part. I need a lull. I need it calm for 2 seconds. You call the calm, and the instant you call it, I trigger the helmet, and then we ride it out. You be my eyes on the wind. Don't take them off it. Copy. The seconds stretched. Down in the valley, the wind pushed the dust in long, slow curtains, and the heat rose in waves, and somewhere in the saddle, a very patient man lay under a net, breathing slow and shallow, believing with total confidence that he owned this valley and everyone in it. He did not know about the woman on the ridge. He did not know his name was about to be added to a list of the dead. He believed he was the hunter. He had always been the hunter. "Wind's dropping," Wallace breathed. "Wind's dropping, ma'am. It's coming down. Stand by, stand by." "Vance," Emily said, calm as still water. "Helmet up, slow." 600 yards away, Corporal Vance raised the spare helmet on the end of a broken tree branch, slow and wobbling up over the left edge of the boulder, exactly like a frightened man trying to steal a glimpse of the enemy that was killing his friends. In the saddle under the net, a scope shifted. "Wind's flat," Wallace whispered. "It's flat now. Now you're clear." The helmet rose. The shimmer in the saddle went still, absolutely still, the way a predator goes still. And then a round came out of that saddle, and it struck the helmet dead center and tore it off the branch and sent it spinning away into the dust. And in the exact instant after the shot, the way Emily had known he would, the way a proud man always did, the shooter lifted his head the barest fraction of an inch to confirm his kill. And Emily Carter was already there. She had been there before he moved. Her breath was out. Her heart was between beats. The reticle sat on the top of that thin heat shimmer, and her finger completed a press. It had begun a half second before, smooth and unhurried, and the rifle fired. 1,100 yards away, across the swirling wind and the rising heat and all the impossible distance, the round found the man who thought he was invisible. The shimmer in the saddle stopped shimmering. The breathing stopped, and the Spectre unit was down one ghost. For a long moment, nobody in the valley understood what had happened. The men in cover had heard the enemy round strike the helmet, and they had braced for the follow-up, for the next kill, for the relentless, patient murder to continue. And instead, there had been a second shot from behind them and above them from the high ridge, and then a silence that felt completely different from the silence before it. "Alpha, this is Reaper," Emily said, and her voice was still perfectly calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something the men would talk about for the rest of their lives. "One shooter down, northeast saddle. He is no longer a factor, but listen to me carefully. There are more of them, and they just watched their man die, and they are adjusting right now. So you do not move. You hold exactly where you are. This is not over. Do you copy?" Daniels keyed his radio. His hand was shaking, and it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from something else, something closer to awe. "Reaper, this is Daniels. We copy. And Reaper, go ahead, Chief. Whoever you are, wherever you came from, thank you. That's all. Just thank you." There was the smallest pause on the net, and when she answered for just a second, the flat, calm voice had something warm underneath it, quick, inhuman, and gone almost before it arrived. "Don't thank me yet, Chief," Emily said. "We've got a long way to go. Hold still. I've got more work to do." Mitchell was staring up at the ridge, up at where the shot had come from, at a place so far away he couldn't even see it, and there were tears cutting clean lines through the dust on his face, and he wasn't ashamed of them. "She killed him, Chief," he whispered. "She actually killed him, from all the way up there. She actually did it. She did." "Amber," Mitchell said, and his voice broke completely now, and he let it. "I'm going to see Amber. I'm actually going to see her." "You hold on to that," Daniel said, and his own voice wasn't steady either. "You hold on to Amber, but you keep your head down because that woman just told us this isn't over, and I believe her. So we hold. We hold and we let her work, whoever she is." Up on the ridge, Emily Carter did not celebrate. She did not let herself feel the relief that wanted to flood through her. She reached over without a word, and she began cycling a fresh round into the chamber. And her eyes were already moving, already hunting, already reading the valley for the next thread of heat that shouldn't be there, for the next thing that moved wrong, for the next ghost hiding in the broken ground. Because she knew the truth that the men in the valley were only beginning to understand. The one she had just killed was not the dangerous one. He was the easy one. He was the confident one, the proud one, the one who couldn't resist confirming his kill. The ones still alive down there were the ones who had just watched their brother die and had not moved a single muscle in response. They were the ones who had swallowed their grief and their rage and gone perfectly still, and were now, at this very moment, thinking, adjusting, learning her. Wallace, she said quietly, they know we're here now. They know there's a shooter on the high ridge. The math just flipped. 10 minutes ago, we were invisible. Now we're a target. So from here on, everything we do assuming there is a rifle looking for us right now. You understand? We move like the hunted even while we hunt. Copy, ma'am. They're going to try to find us, and they're patient, and they're smart, and there's at least one down there who's better than the man I just killed. Maybe a lot better. She settled deeper into the rifle. So let's find him first. Down in the valley in the long silence that followed, Chief Daniels lay in the ditch and listened to his own heartbeat the way he had at the start. But it sounded different now. It didn't sound like fear. It sounded like a clock ticking down, not toward death, but towards something else. Toward rescue. Toward the impossible chance that they might all walk out of this valley alive because of one calm voice on a high ridge. One woman with a rifle in a mine like still water, who had walked into a duel with ghosts and drawn first blood. He didn't know yet how much worse it was going to get. He didn't know about the flanking man, or the big rifle that could shatter stone, or the moment when the hunter on the ridge would become the hunted. He only knew that for the first time in over an hour he had a reason to believe. And so did every man in Alpha Platoon. Everybody hold, Daniel said into the net, and his voice was steady, now steady as hers because her steadiness had become his. You hold what you got. We got an angel on the ridge, and she's not done. Not by a long shot. The valley went silent again. But it was a waiting silence now, not a dying one. And up on the ridge, the angel settled her cheek against the rifle, breathed out slow, and went back to work. The silence didn't last. It never did in that valley. Emily lay flat against the ridge, her cheek welded to the rifle, and she counted. Not seconds, breaths. She had learned a long time ago that a man could lie to himself about time, could tell himself an hour had passed when it had been 10 minutes, but a man could not lie to himself about breathing. So she counted her own breaths, and she watched the valley below, and somewhere down there, two men who had just lost their brother were counting too, counting her mistakes, waiting for one. They've gone dark, Wallace whispered. Completely dark. No shots, no movement, nothing. I know. That's good, right? They're scared. They're hiding. No, Emily said. That's not fear. Scared men make noise. Scared men shift around and check their corners and whisper to each other. These men have gone perfectly still and perfectly quiet, and that's the opposite of scared. That's a decision. They decided to disappear, and they're better at disappearing than almost anyone alive. They're not hiding from us, Wallace. They're setting up on us. Down in the ditch, Chief Daniels felt the change too, and he didn't like it. He'd been a soldier long enough to know that quiet wasn't peace. Quiet was the space between a man drawing a knife and using it. Mitchell, he breathed. You feel that? Feel what, Chief? I don't hear anything. That's what I mean. 10 minutes ago, they were shooting every couple minutes, keeping us pinned, playing their little game. Now nothing. They stopped playing. He wet his cracked lips. They stopped playing with us and started playing with her. Mitchell turned his head a fraction of an inch toward the ridge he couldn't see. The lady, they're going after the lady now. That'd be my guess. We're not the target anymore, Mitchell. We're just the bait. She's the prize now. And they know she's up on that ridge somewhere. And right now, this second, they are hunting her the same way they hunted us. Mitchell's stomach dropped. So we just lie here and hope she wins. That's the whole war, kid, Daniel said quietly. That's every war there ever was. Somebody's up there in the dark, deciding whether you live or die, and all you can do is lie in a ditch and hope they're better than the other guy. Up on the ridge, Emily was already moving through the problem in her head the way she always did, laying it out piece by piece and refusing to let a single piece of it touch her hands. Two shooters left. Both had watched their partner die. Both knew a rifle sat somewhere on the high ridge. Both were now searching the ridgeline, inch by inch, reading it the way she had read the valley, looking for the same tell she had used against them. Heat, movement, a shadow that fell wrong, a shape that didn't belong, which meant she had to be more disciplined than she had ever been in her life. Wallace, she said, don't move, I mean it. Not a muscle. From this second on, we are two rocks on a hillside because right now there is a man down there glassing this ridge, and the first thing that moves up here is the first thing that dies. Understood. But there was a problem, and Emily knew it, and it was the kind of problem that got people killed. The men down in that valley were not going to move. They had all the time in the world. They could lie under their nets for 6 hours for 12, for as long as it took, breathing slow, waiting for her to make one small human mistake, to scratch an itch, to shift a cramped leg, to lift her head to check the wind. But Alpha Platoon didn't have 6 hours. Alpha Platoon had wounded men bleeding into the dirt, and a corpse cooking in the sun, and the daylight burning down toward a night that would bring its own kind of horror. If Emily played the patient game, she might win the sniper duel and lose the platoon. And that was not a trade she was willing to make. "They want to wait me out," she murmured. "They want to make this take forever because forever is on their side. So I'm not going to give forever. I'm going to make them move the same as I did with the first one. I just have to be smarter about it because these two are smarter than he was." How do you make a man move who's got nothing but time? "You threaten something he can't afford to lose," Emily said. "Same as anybody. You find the thing he's protecting, and you go for it, and you make him choose between holding still and losing the thing. Everybody's protecting something. I just have to figure out what they're protecting." Down in the ditch, the weight was doing its slow, terrible work on Mitchell. His body had locked up from holding one position so long, and his mind with nothing to do had started to eat itself. He kept seeing Reyes drop. He kept hearing that first shot that never came the kill without a sound, and he kept imagining it happening to Daniels, to himself, to any of them at any second out of the empty air. "Chief," he whispered. "Chief, I gotta talk. If I don't talk, I'm gonna lose it. I can feel it. I'm gonna lose it, and I'm gonna do something stupid." "Then talk. Talk quiet, but talk. Tell me about Amber. Tell me about the name. You pick a name yet?" "Sarah wants Grace," Mitchell said, and his voice steadied a little just saying it. "Grace Amber Mitchell." I said, "Okay, just to make her happy, but I actually really like it." "Grace," he almost laughed. "You believe that I'm lying in a ditch in the worst day of my life, and the thing keeping me sane is a name for a baby I've never met." "That's not crazy," Daniel said. "That's the sanest thing I ever heard. That's the whole reason any of us do this. So there's a world where a kid named Grace gets to grow up not knowing what a place like this is. You hold on to Grace. She's your anchor. You feel yourself starting to slip. You grab Grace and you hold on." Up on the ridge, Emily had found her answer, and it was a cold one. "Wallace, listen to me. The first shooter, the one I killed, he was the confident one, the show-off, the one who shot a corpse just to be cruel. That kind of man is usually the youngest or the most reckless of a cell, which tells me the other two are the disciplined ones, the leadership. And a disciplined sniper cell has a hierarchy, and the hierarchy has a leader, and the leader is the one making the decisions right now. He's the one who decided to go dark. He's the one running the hunt for us. If I take him, the last one falls apart because the last one's been following orders this whole time and won't know what to do without them." "Okay, so how do you find the leader?" "The leader will be in the best remaining position," Emily said. "Not the flashiest, the smartest, best fields of fire, best concealment, best escape route. He picked it before the fight even started, because that's what leaders do. They plan, and he's watching the ridge for me right now with more patience than his partner has because he's more disciplined, which means his partner is the weak link. The last one, the follower. If I can rattle the follower, make the follower move or shoot or panic, the follower will give away the leader's position by association because they'll be covering the same sector." Wallace was quiet for a second, taking it in. "Ma'am, that's a lot of reading minds off an empty valley." "That's not mind reading," Emily said. "That's just paying attention. Everybody thinks snipers are about shooting. Shooting's the last 5%. The other 95 is this. It's lying still and thinking about who your enemy is and what he loves and what he's scared of and where he'd hide. The rifle's just the period at the end of the sentence. The sentence is all up here." She tapped her own temple with one still finger. "So I write the sentence, and then I put the period on it. That's the whole job." And then down in the valley, something happened that Emily had not planned for, and it changed everything. One of the wounded men broke. He was a young private named Kowalski, tucked behind the dry creek bed near Foster the radio man, and he'd taken a round through the meat of his thigh in the first 30 seconds of the ambush, and he'd been bleeding and terrified for over an hour, and the mind can only take so much. He heard the silence, the long dead silence, and something in him decided the silence meant it was over, that the shooters were gone, that it was safe, and he stood up. "No!" Foster hissed, lunging for him. "Kowalski, get down, it's not!" But Kowalski was already up, swaying on his wounded leg, blinking in the sunlight, like a man waking from a dream. And for one horrible frozen second, the entire valley seemed to hold its breath. Up on the ridge, Emily saw him stand, and her whole body went cold. "No, no, no," she breathed. "Get down, kid, get down." Down in the ditch, Daniels saw it too, and he screamed into the net, all discipline gone. "Kowalski, get down now," and the round came. It came from the follower, the weak link, the undisciplined one, and it was a rush shot, a greedy shot, a shot taken because a target had presented itself, and the shooter couldn't resist, and it caught Kowalski high in the shoulder and spun him around and dropped him back down behind the creek bed. Foster grabbed him and hauled him the rest of the way down, and Kowalski was screaming now, alive but screaming, and the sound of it carried across the whole valley. But Emily wasn't listening to the screaming. Emily had seen the shot. She had seen exactly where it came from. Because the follower, in his haste and his hunger for the easy kill, had fired from a position he had not fully prepared, and the muzzle blast had kicked up a tiny puff of dust from beneath his net, a signature no disciplined shooter would ever have allowed. "Got you," Emily whispered. "There you are. You just couldn't help yourself, could you?" "You see him," Wallace said, already swinging his scope, "where low ground south of the saddle, that shelf of broken rock about a third of the way up the slope. He fired from cover, but he rushed it and he threw dust. He's there. He's exactly there." She was already reading the range of the wind, the mirage, her hands moving over her rifle with the calm of a woman who had done this 10,000 times. "But Wallace, listen to me. I'm not going to shoot him." "What, you just found him? He just shot one of our guys. Why wouldn't you?" "Because he's the follower. He's the bait now, whether he knows it or not. The leader is watching that exact spot right now, thinking the same thing. I'm thinking his partner just made a fatal mistake. And the leader is waiting to see if I'll take the shot, because the second I shoot, I reveal myself, and then the leader kills me. That's the trap. The follower's mistake is the leader's trap. If I shoot the follower, I win a piece and lose the game." Wallace stared at her. "So what do? We make the leader think I fell for it," Emily said. "We fake the shot." Down in the ditch, Daniels was breathing hard, his heart slamming, Kowalski's screams still echoing in his ears. "He's alive," he said to Mitchell. "Kowalski's alive. Foster's got him. He's hit again, but he's alive." "Why'd he stand up, Chief? Why would he do that?" "Because he's a kid and he's scared, and he's been bleeding for an hour, and his brain told him the quiet meant safe. It's not his fault. It's what fear does. It waits till you're worn all the way down, and then it whispers the one lie that gets you killed." Daniels closed his eyes. It almost worked. It almost got him killed, and it almost showed the enemy right where the rest of us are. Mitchell was shaking. "This is never going to end, is it? It's just going to keep going till they get all of us." "No," Daniel said, and he grabbed the front of Mitchell's vest and pulled him close and made him look at him. "No, you listen to me. It ends. It ends today. Because we got somebody up there who is better than they are, and she just watched Kowalski get shot, and I promise you, she is already 3 moves ahead of these animals. You hold on to Grace, and you let her work." Up on the ridge, Emily was laying her trap over the enemy's trap, one deception folded inside another. "Wallace, here's what happens next. I'm going to fire around, but not at the follower. I'm going to fire into the dirt just short of his position. Close enough that it looks like I took the shot and missed. When the leader sees a miss on his partner's position, he's going to think 2 things at once. He's going to think the ridge shooter took the bait and missed, and he's going to think, now I know roughly where the ridge shooter is from the angle of that miss. And he's going to get greedy. He's going to shift to engage me because he thinks I just showed him my hand and blew my shot. And when he shifts, he moves. And when he moves, he's mine. That's insane, ma'am. You're betting your life on how a man you've never met is going to feel about a missed shot." "That's every shot I've ever taken," Emily said simply. "I've never met a single one of them. All I've ever had is what I could read off the land and the way they behaved. It's always a bet. The only question is whether you've done enough work to make it a good bet. And I've done the work." She breathed out. "Call my wind." "Ma'am." Call my win, Wallace. Trust me or don't, but call my win because I'm doing this either way, and I'd rather do it with you than without you. Wallace looked at her at the absolute certainty in her stillness, and he made his choice. He put his eye back to the scope and he read the valley. Full value left to right 6 to 8, steady for now. You're clear to that shelf. Watch the leader when I fire. Don't watch the follower. Watch everywhere but the follower. The follower's the show. The leader's the truth. The second anything shifts anywhere else on that slope, you call it. Copy. Emily settled. She let the world go quiet. She was aware of the follower's position on the rock shelf, aware of the dust still faintly hanging in the air where he'd rushed his shot, and she moved her point of aim deliberately low and short into the dirt below him, into a spot that would say to any watching eye, the ridge shooter tried for your partner and blew it. Firing, she breathed. The rifle spoke, and 1,100 yards away, the round struck exactly where she wanted it, kicking up a spray of dirt just below and short of the follower's shelf, a clean, obvious miss. And then she waited, not for the follower, for the leader. For 1 second, nothing. 2 seconds, 3. And then on the far side of the slope, 100 yards from the follower, in a position so well concealed that even Emily had not spotted it, something shifted. A shape that had been part of the mountain for over an hour, decided the moment had come, decided the ridge shooter had just exposed herself and missed her shot, and was now vulnerable. And that shape began to slide smooth and fast and confident into a better firing position to engage the ridge. There, Wallace breathed, his voice tight with disbelief. There he is, ma'am, high on the slope, north end. He's moving, you were right. God help me, you were right, he's moving. I see him, Emily said, and her voice never changed, never rose, never cracked. I see you now. You just told me everything I needed to know. But the leader was fast, and the leader was good, and he was already settling into his new position, already swinging his own rifle toward the section of ridge where he believed the ridge shooter to be. And here was the thing that turned Emily's blood to ice water in her veins. He wasn't aiming at the wrong spot. He was aiming close, dangerously close. He had read the angle of her fake miss, and he had reverse engineered her approximate position from it. And he was now bringing his rifle to bear on a patch of ridge no more than 30 yards from where she and Wallace actually lay. He's close, ma'am, Wallace whispered, and now there was fear in his voice, real fear. He's on us. He's almost on us. 30 yards off, maybe less. He's walking it right toward us. I know. Take the shot. Take the shot now, ma'am. Please, before he... Not yet. Ma'am, Wind Wallace. The leader's rifle swung another few degrees toward them. In a matter of seconds, his scope would cross their actual position, and a sniper of his caliber would not need more than a fraction of a second to recognize what he was looking at and to fire. It was a race now, a race measured in inches and heartbeats between his scope finding them and her finger finding its break. Wind, Emily said, and for the first time there was steel in it, a whip crack of command. Wallace forced his eyes back to the wind, forced his voice to work. Full value 6, steady, steady. You're clear, ma'am. You're clear. Take it. Emily's breath was already out. Her heart was already between beats. The reticle sat on the shape high on the slope, the leader of the Spectre unit, the disciplined ghost who had murdered Reyes and shot a corpse for sport and hunted her across a mile of broken ground and come within 30 yards in 1 second of killing her. Her finger completed its press slow and smooth and utterly without hurry, even as his rifle swung the final few degrees toward her face. The shot broke. And high on that slope, a fraction of a second before his own scope would have found her, the leader of the Spectre unit stopped moving forever. For a long moment, the valley was silent, and then Wallace let out a breath that was almost a groan and pressed his forehead into the dirt. You got him, he whispered. You got him. He was on us. He was right on us, and you got him first. How? How did you? He was faster than me, Emily said quietly, and there was something in her voice now, a tiny tremor she would let herself feel for exactly 3 seconds and no longer. He was faster than me getting into position, but I was already in position. That was the whole difference. He had to move to me. I only had to wait for him to arrive. Speed doesn't beat position. It never has. She breathed out slow. But it was close, Wallace. That was too close. I don't want it to ever be that close again. Down in the ditch, Chief Daniels had heard the 2 shots the fake missed in the kill, and he had not understood what they meant. And then Reaper's voice came over the net, and it was still calm, but there was an edge under it that hadn't been there before, a human edge. A "we almost died" edge. "Alpha, this is Reaper. Second shooter down." I say again, second shooter down, North Slope. That was their leader. He is no longer a factor. Daniels closed his eyes. "Two, Reaper. You're telling me you got two of them?" "That's affirmative, Chief." That leaves one. That leaves one, right? You said two, maybe three. So that's one left." There was a pause on the net. And when Emily answered, the pause itself told Daniels something was wrong before she even spoke. "That's my read, Chief. One left. But listen to me carefully now, because this is the part that matters. The two I killed, they were the disciplined ones. The planners. The follower down on the rock shelf, the one who shot your man Kowalski, he was the reckless one. The young one. And I just killed his leader in front of him. So right now, down in that valley, there is one enemy shooter left, and he is young, and he is undisciplined, and he just watched me kill both of his brothers. And he is not thinking clearly anymore. And a sniper who isn't thinking clearly isn't less dangerous, Chief. He's more dangerous. Because you can predict a disciplined man. You cannot predict a man who's got nothing left to lose." Daniels felt the cold come back into his chest. So it's not over. It's not over. It might be about to get worse. Because a scared, grieving, undisciplined man with a sniper rifle does one of two things. He runs, or he decides to take somebody with him. And I don't know yet which kind he is. A beat. So you hold still and you keep your men down, all of them, especially the wounded. Because if he's the kind who wants to take somebody with him, he's going to be looking for one last kill. You understand me? Nobody moves. Nobody stands up. Not for any reason. "Copy, Reaper." Nobody moves. Mitchell had heard all of it, and he was shaking his head slowly in the dirt. "One left, Chief. Just one. And she's up there, and he's down here, and it's almost done." "It's not done," Daniel said. "You heard her. The last one's the wild card. The last one's the one who might do something crazy. But she got two of them. Two, Chief. From up on that ridge. Both of them. Do you understand what that is? Do you understand what we're watching?" Daniels was quiet for a moment. Because yes, he did understand. He'd been in the Navy 19 years, and he'd seen good shooters and great shooters, and one or two who were touched by something close to genius. And he had never, not once, seen anything like what was happening on that ridge today. A duel against a coordinated cell of the best snipers he'd ever encountered, fought and won 2 of 3 by a single shooter reading dust and heat and the hearts of men she had never met. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, I understand. Someday, Mitchell, if we get out of here, you're going to tell your daughter about this. You're going to tell Grace that the reason her daddy came home is because there was a woman on a ridge who was better than the best killers in the world, and she never even raised her voice." Mitchell wiped the dust and the tears from his face with the back of a shaking hand. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I am. I'm going to tell her that." Up on the ridge, Emily Carter was not thinking about legends or stories or anything a father might someday tell his daughter. She was thinking about the one man left alive in that valley, the young, reckless, grieving one. And she was trying to get inside his head, and she did not like what she was finding there. "Wallace," she said, "the last one, he's stopped shooting, but he hasn't run. I've been watching the whole southern slope, and I haven't seen a single sign of movement toward the exits. No dust trail heading out, nothing. If he were running, I'd see it. He's not running. So he's frozen. He's in shock. His whole team's dead. Maybe, or maybe he's doing something." She read the valley foot by foot, and a slow, cold understanding began to build in her. "Wallace, where's the wounded man, Kowalski? Where's he lying?" "Behind the creek bed with Foster." "South end. Why?" "Because the last shooter's last known position was on that rock shelf, and the rock shelf has a clean line to the south end of that creek bed. And the last shooter just watched me kill his whole team, and he can't reach me. He doesn't know exactly where I am, but he knows exactly where the wounded men are. And a man who wants to take somebody with him before he dies doesn't shoot at the shooter he can't find." Her voice dropped quiet and terrible. "He shoots at the wounded man he can. Oh God. Get on the net now. Tell them to pull Kowalski deeper into cover, hard cover, out of the line from that rock shelf right now, this second before." But it was already happening. Down at the south end of the creek bed, Foster was working on Kowalski, packing the shoulder wound, trying to keep the kid conscious, and Kowalski was fading, going gray, and Foster was so focused on saving him that for one instant, one single instant, he shifted his own body to get a better angle on the wound. And in doing so, he lifted himself just slightly into the line of fire from that distant rock shelf. And on the rock shelf, the last of the Spectre unit, the young one, the grieving one, the one with nothing left to lose, saw a target and settled his rifle on it. Emily saw the shimmer of him move. She saw him settle. She understood in the space of half a heartbeat that he was about to fire on Foster, and that Foster had no idea, and that there was no time to warn anyone, no time for the radio, no time for anything except the one thing she had trained her entire life to do. She had no shot lined up on him. Her rifle was pointed at empty ground. He was 100 yards from where her scope was aimed, and he was about to fire, and the only thing in the world faster than a warning was a bullet. "Wallace," she said, and her voice was the calmest it had been all day, calm the way the center of a storm is calm. "Don't call the wind. There's no time. I'm going to have to read it myself, and I'm going to have to do it now." And Emily Carter swung her rifle fast and smooth off the empty ground and onto the rock shelf, onto the last ghost in the valley, reading the wind and the range and the drop in the space of a single breath, trusting a lifetime of instinct to do in 1 second what usually took her 30, because a young man she'd never met named Foster was about to die. And the only thing standing between him and the round already seated in the enemy's chamber was a woman on a ridge in the fraction of a second she had left to save him. Down in the valley, Foster leaned over Kowalski, murmuring, "Stay with me, kid. Stay with me. You're going to be fine. I got you." Never knowing, never once knowing that a mile away a finger was already tightening on a trigger, and that his entire life had just come down to which of two shooters was faster and calmer and better in the last half second before the valley decided who got to go home. The rifle came around, and Emily Carter did the impossible thing she had spent 20 years learning to do without thinking about it. She read a shot she had no time to read. There was no math on paper. There was no calling of the wind. There was only a lifetime folded into a single second, the mirage she'd been reading for the last hour, the wind she'd felt on the back of her own neck, the range she'd already burned into her memory, all of it collapsing at once into one instinct. One point of aim, one exhale. Her scope found the shimmer on the rock shelf, the young shooter settling on Foster, and she did not wait for certainty, because certainty was a luxury that cost lives, and she pressed the trigger the way you catch a falling glass before your mind has even told your hand to move. The rifle fired, and 100 yards from where her scope had been aimed a half second earlier, on a rock shelf a mile away, the last of the Spectre unit flinched as her round struck the stone inches from his face. She missed. "You missed," Wallace breathed, and the horror in his voice was a living thing. "Ma'am, you missed. He's still." "I know I missed." Emily was already cycling the bolt fast and smooth, her voice flat as steel. "I missed on purpose, short, same as before. No, I read it wrong. The wind swirled. I didn't have time. I know. Watch Foster." Because here was the thing. The miss had not been wasted. The miss had done the one thing she needed done more than a kill. The round striking the rock beside the young shooter's head had made him flinch, had thrown off his own shot, had made him jerk his rifle a fraction of an inch in the instant he fired at Foster. Down in the creek bed, the enemy round meant for the base of Foster's skull passed instead through the empty air above his shoulder, close enough that Foster felt the heat of it, close enough that the crack of it broke over him like a slap. And Foster threw himself flat over Kowalski's body with a scream, a live hole spared by the width of a flinch. "He's down, Foster's down, but he's moving. He's alive," Wallace said, his voice cracking. "He's alive, ma'am. You saved him, you missed, and you still saved him." "I didn't miss to save him, ma'am," Emily said, already back on the rock shelf, already hunting. "I missed and it saved him. There's a difference, and I'm not going to get a third chance. He knows exactly where I am now. I just fired twice from the same spot. He's got my position cold." She was moving even as she spoke, low and fast, dragging her rifle. "Wallace, we displace now. Right now. Move." Down in the ditch, Chief Daniels had heard the two shots close together, and then Foster's scream, and his heart had stopped in his chest. "Foster," he barked into the net. "Foster, report. Are you hit? Talk to me." For a horrible second, nothing. And then Foster's voice, ragged and shaking and gloriously alive. I'm up, Chief. He shot at me. He shot right at my head. It missed. I don't understand how it missed. It was right on me." It missed because Reaper made it miss, Daniel said, and his own voice was shaking now. You hear me, Foster? You're alive because that woman on the ridge put a round next to that animal's head at the exact second he pulled the trigger on you. That's why you're breathing. You remember that. You remember that for the rest of your life. Mitchell was staring up at the invisible ridge, his mouth open. She did it again, Chief. She did it again. How does she keep? I don't know, Daniel said. I stopped asking how an hour ago. I'm just glad she's on our side. But up on the ridge, Emily Carter was not thinking about how, and she was not glad, and she was not calm, not entirely, not anymore. She and Wallace had scrambled 40 yards along the ridgeline to a new position, and she was flat again now, her chest heaving, and for the first time all day, she let herself feel the truth of the situation, and the truth was bad. Wallace, she said quietly. That last one, I underestimated him. What? He's the reckless one. You said so yourself. The young one, the follower, the one who's not thinking straight. That's what I said. And I was wrong. She wet her lips. A reckless man, a panicking man. After watching me kill his whole team, he takes a wild shot at the first target he sees and then he runs or he freezes. That's what a reckless man does. But this one, he didn't take a wild shot. He waited. He waited for the wounded man's caretaker to lift up into his line of fire. Patient, deliberate, and then he took a clean, deliberate, precise shot at the base of a man's skull. That's not reckless, Wallace. That's cold. That's disciplined. That's the coldest thing I've seen all day. She stared out at the valley. I read him wrong. He's not the weak one. He was never the weak one. The two I killed weren't the leaders. He was letting me think they were. Wallace went very still. I'm saying I killed the second best and the third best. I'm saying the man I've got left is the best one, the real leader. And he let his two brothers die to teach me everything about how I shoot so that now when it's just him and me, he knows me and I don't know him. Her jaw tightened. He sacrificed them. He watched me kill two men he'd fought beside for years, and he used their deaths to study me, and he never moved to save either of them, because saving them wasn't worth as much to him as learning me. That's who I'm up against. The weight of it settled over both of them. Down in the valley, 3 shooters had seemed like the nightmare, and now the nightmare had a new shape, and it was worse because the real one was still alive, and he had spent the last hour going to school on Emily Carter while she thought she was winning. Then we're in trouble, Wallace said quietly. We're in trouble, Emily agreed. But so is he, because he made one mistake. He taught me something too, and he doesn't know it. What? He values the mission over the men. 2 of his brothers died in front of him, and he never twitched because taking me was worth more to him than saving them. Which tells me he'll spend anything to win. And a man who'll spend anything to win is a man who can be baited into overreaching because he'll take a risk another man wouldn't if the risk gets him the prize. She breathed slow. I just have to make myself the prize. I have to make him want me so badly he forgets to be careful. And then I have to be there when he reaches for me. Down in the ditch, the minutes crawled and Mitchell had gone quiet again, and this time Daniels let him because there wasn't anything left to say. They were spectators now in the truest and most terrible sense, their lives being decided a mile away by 2 people they couldn't see in a duel they could only hear in fragments over the radio. Chief, Mitchell finally whispered, can I ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Not the ditch truth, the real truth. Ask. Do you think she can beat this last one the way she talked about him just now on the net? She sounded different. She sounded worried. I never heard her sound worried before. Daniels was quiet for a long moment. He thought about lying, and then he remembered his own rule, that lying to a scared man was a way of disrespecting him. I don't know, he said. That's the real truth. She beat 2 of the best I've ever seen. But she's telling us the last one's better than both of them put together, and I believe her because she's been right about every single thing today. So I don't know, Mitchell. I think it's a coin toss. I think for the first time all day, it's a genuine coin toss. Mitchell swallowed. Then I hope she's a lucky woman. Luck's got nothing to do with it up there, Daniel said. But I hope she's the better one. I hope she's the better one. Up on the ridge, Emily was building the most dangerous plan of her career, and she knew it, and she was doing it anyway. Wallace, I'm going to give him what he wants. I'm going to give him me. Wallace's head came around. Say that again. He wants me. He spent his brother's lives to get a clean shot at me. So I'm going to show him a piece of me. Not a helmet on a stick. He's too smart for that. Now he watched me use that trick on the first one. I'm going to give him something more convincing. I'm going to give him a real position, a real shooter's nest with real movement in it, and I'm going to make him believe I've made a mistake and gotten sloppy and exposed myself. And he's going to take the shot. And the muzzle flash of that shot from a man that good, hidden that well, is going to be the only thing that ever tells me where he is. One flash, that's all I'm going to get, and I have to kill him off of it before he can cycle his bolt and correct. Wallace stared at her. In the position you're going to put in front of him. The bait, the real shooter's nest with real movement in it. His voice dropped. That's you, isn't it? You're the bait. You're going to make him shoot at you for real. Emily didn't answer right away, and her silence was the answer. No, Wallace said. No, ma'am, no. There's got to be another way. You put yourself in his crosshairs, and he's as good as you say he is, and he doesn't miss. That's it. That's the whole thing. You're gone, and he's still up, and then he cleans out the whole platoon at his leisure. I won't spot for that. I won't. Wallace, you said it yourself. He's a cold shot. He's precise. He doesn't rush. You give him a real target, he takes it clean first round, and there's no flinch to save you like you saved Foster. You'd be betting your life that you can find a hidden muzzle flash and kill a master sniper before he works his bolt, and nobody is fast enough to win that bet every time. I don't have to win it every time, Emily said quietly. I have to win it once. And there it was, the thing that separated her from every other shooter Wallace had ever spotted for. She had looked at the math, at the terrible odds, at the very real chance that this was the shot that killed her. And she had accepted it cleanly and completely because on the other side of that bet were the lives of every man pinned in that valley, and she had decided her one life was a fair price against all of theirs. You're going to get yourself killed, Wallace said, and his voice broke. Maybe, Emily said, but if I sit up here and play it safe and wait him out, that man down there is going to get bored, and he's going to go back to the thing he was doing at the start. He's going to go back to killing the platoon one wounded man at a time to draw me out. He'll kill Kowalski. He'll kill Foster. He'll work his way through every hurt man down there until I break and do something desperate. So I'm not going to give him the time to do that. I'm going to force the ending now, on my terms, while I still get to choose them. That's not being reckless, Wallace. That's the opposite. That's me spending the one thing I'm willing to spend myself before he can make me spend something I'm not willing to spend. Them. Wallace was quiet for a long time, and then because he had come to understand exactly who he was lying beside on that ridge, he put his eye back to the scope. Then I'm going to spot the best I ever have in my life, he said, his voice rough. And you're going to kill this animal off his muzzle flash, and we're both going to walk off this ridge. You hear me, both of us? Both of us, Emily agreed. Now here's how we do it. Down in the ditch, Daniels heard the net crackle, and then Reaper's voice, and there was something different in it now. Something that made the hair on his arm stand up, a stillness that went even deeper than her usual calm. Alpha, this is Reaper. I need you to listen to me, and I need you to do exactly what I say, and I need you not to argue because there's no time to argue. In about 90 seconds, there is going to be shooting up here on the ridge. You're going to hear it. Some of it is going to sound bad. I need every single man in that platoon to stay down and stay put, no matter what you hear. Do not move. Do not try to help. Do not do anything. Whatever happens up here, the best thing you can do for me is stay exactly where you are. Do you understand? Over. Daniels felt his throat close. Reaper, this is Daniels. What are you about to do? A pause, and when she answered, her voice had, for just a moment, that quick, warm human thing under it again, the thing he'd heard once before there and gone. I'm about to end it, Chief, one way or the other. That's all you need to know. Reaper, Emily, whatever your name is. Daniels gripped the radio so hard his knuckles went white. Don't you do anything stupid up there. You've been keeping us alive for 2 hours. Don't you throw yourself away now. You hear me? There was a silence on the net, and then softly. Chief, can I tell you something? Go. I've got a mother in Ohio, little town outside Dayton, And if this doesn't go the way I want it to, somebody's going to come tell her that her daughter died in some valley she can't find on a map, fighting people she never met to save men she never knew. A beat. And she's going to ask if it was worth it. And I need you to know so that somebody down there knows that it was. Every second of it was worth it. You've got a man down there whose baby's coming in October. I heard it on the net. I heard him telling you, Grace. He's going to see Grace. That's worth my whole life, Chief, and then some. So don't you tell me not to spend it. It's mine to spend, and I'm spending it on the best thing I ever found to spend it on. Reaper out. The net went quiet, and in the ditch, Ryan Mitchell, who had heard every word, put his face down into the dirt and wept silently, his whole body shaking, because a woman he had never seen and would probably never meet had just told the whole platoon that his unborn daughter was worth her life, and he did not have a single thing in the world he could do about it except stay down and pray. Chief, he choked out. Chief, she can't. She can't do that. Not for us. Not for me. She already decided, Daniel said, and his own face was wet now, and he didn't care. You heard her. It's already done in her head. All we can do is what she asked. Stay down. Give her the quiet she needs. Let her work. He reached over and gripped the back of Mitchell's neck, hard the way a father grips a son. And you live, Mitchell. Whatever happens up on that ridge, you live, and you go home and you hold your daughter, and someday you tell Grace about the woman from Ohio. That's how you pay her back. That's the only way any of us can pay her back. We live. Up on the ridge, Emily was setting her final trap. Wallace, 40 yards east, there's that notch in the rock, the one with the good backdrop and the clear line down into the valley. I'm going to set up there, and I'm going to make it look real. I'm going to expose enough of myself that a man watching this ridge is going to believe I got greedy, that I found a target and leaned into it and forgot my discipline. And when I do, he's going to take the shot. In the instant I see his flash, I'm going to roll hard to my left, and I'm going to come up, and I'm going to put my reticle where that flash was, and I'm going to end him. She looked at Wallace. Your job is the flash. I'm going to act moving. I'm going to be diving. I might not see it clean. You will. You call it. You call the flash the instant it happens. You give me a clock direction and a landmark, and I'll be there. Everything comes down to you seeing that flash and me trusting your call without a half second of doubt. Can you do that? Wallace looked at her, and he thought about the woman from Ohio and the man whose daughter was named Grace, and every man in that valley who was going to live or die in the next 90 seconds based on whether he, Wallace, could see one muzzle flash and call it clean. I can do that, he said. I will do that. I know you will. Emily gripped his shoulder once hard. Whatever happens, it's been the honor of my life spotting with you. Don't, Wallace said, his voice thick. Don't say goodbye. You come back off that notch. You come back. Then call the flash, Emily said, and I will. And she began to move. She crawled to the notch, low and careful, and she settled into it, and then she did the thing that went against every instinct 20 years of survival had drilled into her. She exposed herself, deliberately. She lifted her profile, let her silhouette break the clean line of the rock, made herself into the exact kind of target she had spent her entire career refusing to become. She made herself look like a shooter who had gotten sloppy, who had found something worth shooting at in the valley, and had leaned in too far, too eager, too human. She made herself look like prey. And somewhere down in that valley, a man who had spent 2 lives to earn this exact moment saw her and could not believe his luck, and settled his rifle onto the woman who had killed his brothers. He's going to take it. Emily breathed, barely moving her lips. Wallace watched the whole southern half, anywhere, any flash. I'm committed now. I can't pull back. Watch for the flash. I'm watching, Wallace whispered. I'm watching. Come on, show me where you are. The seconds stretched into something unbearable. Emily lay exposed in the notch, every nerve in her body screaming at her to move, to duck, to save herself, and she overrode all of it, held herself still, held herself as the bait, because the trap only worked if the bait was convincing, and the most convincing bait in the world was a shooter who truly did not know she was about to die. Down in the ditch, Daniels and Mitchell lay frozen, staring up at a ridge they couldn't see, holding their breath, holding their whole lives in their throats. And then from somewhere in the southern half of the valley, from a position so perfectly concealed that neither Emily nor Wallace had ever come close to spotting it. In 2 hours of searching, a single muzzle flash bloomed in the shadow of the rocks. Flash, Wallace screamed. 10 o'clock low, the dark rock below the dead tree. 10 o'clock. And in the same instant, the enemy round tore through the notch where Emily Carter had been a fraction of a second before, and Emily was already rolling, already diving hard to her left. The way she'd planned the round passing through the space her head had occupied so close it kicked grit into her eyes so close, she felt the wind of it against her cheek like the breath of death itself. She came up out of the roll with her rifle half blind, grit in her eyes, her heart hammering, and she found the 10 o'clock, found the dark rock below the dead tree, found the fading ghost of the muzzle flash burned into the shadow. And she did not have time to range it, and she did not have time to call the wind, and she did not have time to be certain of anything at all. She had exactly one thing. She had Wallace's call and 20 years of instinct and a target that would cycle his bolt and correct and kill her in the next second and a half if she was even a hair too slow. Emily Carter put her reticle on the shadow below the dead tree on the man who had spent everything to earn this moment. And with grit in her eyes and death still ringing in her ears and the whole valley holding its breath, she began to press the trigger. Sao có bao nhiêu bay Trump 2? Bạn nói đúng, phần 3 tôi viết chưa đủ số từ yêu cầu 7.000 đến 7.500 từ. Tôi sẽ viết phần tiếp nối để hoàn thiện bắt đầu ngay từ khoảnh khắc cao trào đang rạng rỡ. The trigger broke, and for one endless fraction of a second, Emily Carter did not know if she was alive or dead. Grit burned in her eyes, her heart slammed against her ribs. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and she waited in that eternal sliver of time to feel the enemy's second round tear through her, because if she had missed, if she had been a hair too slow or a hair off in her aim, then the man below the dead tree was already working his bolt, already correcting, already about to finish what his first shot had started. No second round came. "Did I get him?" she said, and her voice was not calm now, not even a little. It was ragged and desperate and human. "Wallace, did I get him? I can't see. I've got grit in my eyes. Did I get him? Talk to me." Wallace didn't answer for a full second, and that second nearly killed her. And then his voice came out of him in a rush, cracking, breaking, half a laugh and half a sob. "You got him. You got him. Below the dead tree, he's down. He's, ma'am, he went down. He's not moving. He's not. You got him. You got him. He's down." Emily let her forehead drop into the dirt. Her whole body was shaking now. Every muscle she'd been holding rigid for 2 hours, letting go all at once. And she dragged in a breath that felt like the first real breath she'd taken since dawn. "Watch him," she managed. "Keep your eyes on him. Don't you dare take your eyes off that position. He's the best they had. If anybody's going to play possum, if anybody's going to fake being hit and wait for us to relax, it's him. So you watch that rock like your life depends on it, because it does." "I'm watching," Wallace said, wiping his own eyes with the back of his hand, forcing himself back onto the glass. "I'm on him. He's not moving, ma'am. He's not breathing. I can see him now, half out from under the net. The flash pulled him out of his cover just enough. He's gone. He's really gone." But Emily didn't let herself believe it. Not yet. She blinked. The grit out of her streaming eyes got her own scope back onto the dark rock below the dead tree. And she looked and she looked and she made herself count to 60, watching for the smallest twitch, the smallest lift of breath, the smallest sign that the ghost was faking his own death. And there was nothing. The last of the Spectre unit lay motionless in the shadow he'd hidden in for 2 hours, undone at the very end by the one flash he could not avoid, killed by the woman he had spent his entire team's lives to reach. Down in the ditch, Daniels and Mitchell had heard it all. The 2 shots close as a heartbeat, the silence after. And then finally a Reaper's voice on the net, and it was shaking, and somehow the shaking made it more beautiful than any calm had ever been. "Alpha, this is Reaper. 3rd shooter down, the last one. I say again, the last shooter is down. The Spectre unit is finished. The valley is clear." A ragged breath. "It's over. It's over, Chief. You can bring your men home." For a moment, nobody in the ditch moved. It was as if the words were too big to fit inside the small space they'd been living in for 2 hours, a space of held breath and pressed dirt and quiet terror. And then Mitchell made a sound, a broken, gasping, disbelieving sound, and he grabbed the front of Daniel's vest with both hands. It's over, Chief. Chief, did she? Is it? She said it's over. It's over. We're alive. We're alive. Chief, oh God, we're alive. Daniels couldn't speak. 19 years of holding it together, of being the calm one, of being the rock, every scared young man leaned on. And in that moment, it all cracked wide open, and he pressed his face into the dirt and let it come. The tears and the shaking and the enormous crushing relief, because they were alive, all of them, or almost all of them, and there was a woman on a ridge in Ohio who had made it so. Yeah, he finally choked out, gripping Mitchell's hands where they clutched his vest. Yeah, kid, it's over. We're alive. You're gonna see Grace. You're gonna see your girl. And then because he was still the chief, because there were still men out there who needed him, he forced himself back together, forced the shaking down, and he keyed the net. Reaper, this is Daniels. His voice broke on the words and he didn't care. Reaper, are you hit? That last one he shot at you, we heard it. Are you hit over? There was a pause, and in the pause, Daniels felt the fear come rushing back, because 2 hours of listening to that voice had taught him to read the silences in it, and this silence was wrong. Reaper, he said again harder, answer me. Are you hit? I'm okay, Emily said, but there was something in it, something careful, something a man learned to hear after 19 years. I'm okay, Chief. He came close. He came real close, but I'm okay. Up on the ridge, Wallace turned and looked at her, and he saw what her voice was hiding, and his stomach dropped. Because she wasn't entirely okay. When she'd rolled out of the notch to escape the enemy's round, she'd rolled hard across the broken rock, and something had opened up along her side, a long tear where jagged stone had caught her as she dove, and it was bleeding steadily, darkly soaking into her clothes. In the frantic seconds of the duel, she hadn't even felt it. Now, with the adrenaline draining away, it was starting to announce itself, a deep, hot line of pain along her ribs. Ma'am, Wallace said quietly, you're bleeding a lot. When you rolled out of the notch, the rock got you. Let me see it. It's not the shot, Emily said. He missed the shot. It's just the rock. I caught it on the rock coming out of the roll. It's still bleeding and it's still bad. Let me see it now. And here was a strange thing. Emily Carter, who had commanded that entire ridge for 2 hours, who had made every hard call without a tremor, who had decided calmly to offer up her own life as bait, now let Wallace pull her jacket back and check the wound like a child submitting to a parent, because the truth was that the fight was what she was made for, and the after was harder. The after was where the shaking lived. The after was where a person had to feel everything they had held off feeling. It's long, but it's not deep, Wallace said, working fast, pulling out his med kit. You got lucky. Half an inch different, and that rock takes you to the bone. Hold still. Let me pack this. Wallace. Hold still, ma'am. You held still for 2 hours to save all of them. You can hold still for 2 minutes so I can save you. And Emily, despite everything, despite the pain and the bleeding and the sheer bone-deep exhaustion of what she'd just done, let out a small broken laugh. Fair enough, she whispered. That's fair enough. Down in the ditch, Daniels heard the change in the net, the careful pauses, and he pieced together what Reaper wasn't saying. She's hurt, he said to Mitchell. She's hurt up there. That last shot, it didn't miss clean. It got close enough to hurt her. Is she going to be okay? Mitchell's voice was frantic. Chief, is she going to be okay after everything she did, after she offered up her own life for us? She can't. She can't be the one who... I don't know, Daniel said, but I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get to her. That's what we're going to do. She came for us. Now we go for her. He keyed the net, and his voice was the chief's voice, again steady and hard and full of command. All stations Alpha, actual. The valley is clear. Reaper confirms that all 3 enemy shooters down. But we do this smart, you hear me? We move in bounds. We cover our sectors. Because I don't trust a clear valley until I've walked every inch of it myself. Doc, get to Kowalski. Foster, you help him. Vance, your gun team, covers the southern slope while we move. And somebody get me a route up to that ridge, because we've got a wounded SEAL up there who saved every one of our lives, and we are not leaving this valley without her. Am I understood? The net came alive with voices, a dozen men who had lain frozen and terrified for the 2 hours, suddenly moving again, suddenly alive again, suddenly a platoon again, instead of a scattered collection of the pinned and the praying. And underneath all of it, holding it together, was the knowledge of what had been done for them and by whom. Up on the ridge, Emily lay still while Wallace packed and bound the wound along her ribs, and she stared up at the sky, and for the first time in 2 hours, she let her mind go somewhere other than the valley and the wind and the ghosts. Wallace, she said quietly, can I tell you something and you don't repeat it to anybody? Always. I was scared the whole time, every second of it. From the moment I saw that first shooter's heat shimmer to the moment I put my reticle on the last one's muzzle flash, I was scared out of my mind. People think I don't feel it. Even you. I think sometimes you looked at me like I was made of ice. I'm not made of ice. I feel every bit of it. I just learned a long time ago that being scared and being able to work are two different things. And you can be all the way inside one and still do the other if you practice it enough. She turned her head and looked at him. I want somebody to know that I was scared the whole time and did it anyway. Because someday there's going to be some young shooter who feels the fear and thinks it means they're not cut out for this, and I want somebody to be able to tell them that the best day of my career I was terrified from the first second to the last, and it didn't matter. You can be terrified and still be the one who walks off the ridge. Wallace finished tying off the bandage, and he sat back and he looked at her for a long moment. I'll tell them, he said, whoever they are, whenever they come, I'll tell them about the woman who was scared the whole time and saved a whole platoon anyway, I promise. Thank you. Emily let her eyes close for a second. Now help me up, because there's a platoon of men down there who are going to want to see the person who's been talking to them on the radio all day, and I think I owe them that. I think I owe it to them to stand up and let them see I'm real. You should stay down. You're hurt. Let them come to you. They're going to come to me either way. I know how these things go. But I'm not going to be lying flat on my back when they crest that ridge, Wallace. I'm going to be on my feet. Because those men have had a day where everything they believed in got turned upside down, where the enemy was invincible, and then wasn't, where they were dead men, and then weren't, and I am not going to add to that by having them find the person who saved them broken on the ground. They need to see me standing. So help me up. And Wallace, because he understood her now, because he'd understood her for the last 2 hours, got his shoulder under her arm and helped her to her feet. And she stood there on the ridge, swaying a little, one hand pressed to her bound ribs, and she looked down into the valley. She had ruled all day, at the small figures of Alpha Platoon beginning to move again, beginning to live again, and she felt the weight she'd set aside come back into her hands at last, and all of it. Everything she'd held off, and she let it come, and she stood under it, and she did not fall. Down in the valley, the platoon was moving. Doc had reached Kowalski and had him stable the kid, pale but alive, cursing weakly, which Doc said was the best sign there was. Foster had his rifle up, covering his hands finally steady, and Chief Daniels was on his feet for the first time in 2 hours, his legs cramped and screaming, and he stood there in the open, in the terrible exposed open, where Reyes had died and nothing shot him, because the valley truly was clear, because the ghosts truly were gone, and the simple fact of standing upright and drawing breath in the open air felt like being born again. Mitchell stood beside him, swaying on his numb leg, and the two of them looked up at the high ridge, at the distant tiny figure that had just risen to its feet up there, and Mitchell's breath caught. That's her, he whispered. Chief, that's her, standing up there. That's the woman who saved us. That's her, Daniel said. She's real. She's actually real. All this time she was just a voice, and now she's a person. She's standing right there. She was always a person, Mitchell. That was the whole thing that made it matter. If a machine had saved us, if a drone or a bomb had done it, it wouldn't mean what this means. A person did this. A person who was scared, same as us, who had a mother in Ohio, same as we've all got somebody. A person chose to do this. That's what you tell Grace. Not that a weapon saved your daddy, that a person did. That's the whole story. And then, because he couldn't hold it anymore, Daniels raised one arm high over his head toward the distant figure on the ridge, and he held it there, a salute and a wave, and a thank you and a benediction, all at once, from a chief who had run out of words to a woman who had needed none. And up on the ridge, Emily Carter saw the small figure in the valley raise its arm to her, and she understood exactly what it meant. And she lifted her own arm, the one not pressed to her ribs, and she held it up. And for a long moment, the two of them stood there like that across the impossible distance. The saved and the savior arms raised to each other across a valley, full of the silence that comes after the good silence, the living silence. The silence of a battle that a woman had walked into alone against ghosts, and walked out of on her own 2 feet. "Alpha, this is Reaper," she said into the net, and her voice was steadier now, and there was something in it that hadn't been there all day, something that sounded almost like peace. "I see you, Chief. I see you down there. We're going to come down off this ridge, and we're going to link up, and we're going to get everybody out of this valley together, all of us, every single one. That's the mission now. Everybody goes home." "Copy, Reaper," Daniel said, his arm still raised. "Everybody goes home." But even as he said it, even in the warmth of that moment, some old instinct in the back of the chief's mind, the instinct that had kept him alive for 19 years, whispered a small, cold warning that he almost didn't hear over the joy. It whispered that the day was not over yet, that a valley cleared was not a valley left, that there were still miles to walk and casualties to carry and a long way to go before anybody was truly safe. And that in a place like this, in a war like this, the moment you let yourself believe it was finished was the exact moment it reached out and took one more thing from you. Daniels pushed the whisper down. Not now, not in this moment. He let himself have this one, the raised arms and the living silence, and the woman on the ridge. He'd earned it. They all had. But the whisper didn't go away. It never did. It just waited. The whisper was right. It came fast, the way the worst things always did in the middle of the good moment. In the exact instant, everyone let their guard drop. Emily and Wallace had just started down off the ridge, moving slow because of her ribs, when Wallace stopped dead, his head snapping toward the far northern end of the valley, and his voice cut through the peace like a blade. "Ma'am, dust, northern approach. There's dust coming up the valley, a lot of it moving fast." Emily was flat on the ground before he finished the sentence, dragging her rifle up despite the fire in her side, her scope swinging north. "Vehicles," she breathed. 203 vehicles. Technicals. They've got mounted guns. Wallace, that's not the sniper cell, that's a reaction force. Somebody radioed for help, and it came, and it's coming fast, and it is heavily armed. Down in the ditch, the joy of 2 minutes ago died in an instant. Daniels heard the engines before he saw the dust, that low grinding roar of trucks pushing hard over broken ground, and his blood turned to ice. "Contact north," he roared into the net. "Vehicles inbound. Everybody take cover, take cover. Now, this is not over. I say again, this is not over. Get down, get down." Mitchell, who had been standing, who had let himself believe, dropped back into the ditch beside Daniels with a curse that was half a sob. "No, no, Chief, we were done. She said it was over. We were going home." "The snipers were the appetizer, kid," Daniel said grimly, checking his rifle. "This is the main course. Somebody sent for the cavalry, and the cavalry showed up." Up on the ridge, Emily was already doing the math, and the math was ugly. 3 technicals mounted heavy machine guns, and God knew how many fighters riding in the beds, versus a battered platoon with wounded men and dwindling ammunition pinned in open ground with no armor and no air support. It was a slaughter waiting to happen. And she was a mile away on a ridge with a torn side and a bolt-action rifle. "Wallace," she said, her voice snapping back into that flat combat calm, the fear shoved down and set aside where it couldn't touch at her hands. "Get on the net to Overlord. I don't care what they said before about no air. The tactical picture just changed completely. Tell them the enemy has committed a mounted reaction force into the open. There are no friendlies near those vehicles. That is a clean target now. Tell them we need that air support and we need it in the next 5 minutes, or that platoon is going to be overrun. Go." Wallace was already keying the radio. "Overlord, Overlord, this is Reaper Element Priority Fire Mission. We have 3 enemy technicals with mounted guns inbound on Alpha Platoon from the north. They are in the open, no friendlies in proximity. We need immediate close air support. How copy over?" The answer came back, and it was the same maddening faraway calm as before. "Reaper Overlord copies. Be advised, nearest air asset is a pair of attack aircraft, but they are 18 minutes out. I say again, 18 minutes to station. Can Alpha hold over? 18 minutes. Emily closed her eyes for a single second. The technicals would close the distance and be on top of the platoon in 3, maybe 4. 18 minutes was a lifetime. 18 minutes was forever. 18 minutes was every man in that valley dead twice over. "Overlord negative, we cannot hold 18 minutes, Wallace said, his voice tight. "We'll be overrun in 3 or 4. We need something now." Reaper understood air is inbound best speed, but 18 is the number. You'll have to buy that time yourselves, Overlord out. Buy the time yourselves, Emily's jaw set. She looked down at the valley at the three plumes of dust closing fast on the scattered platoon, at the impossible problem of it, and she did the only thing she had ever known how to do when the problem was impossible. She broke it into pieces. Wallace, listen to me fast so we've got seconds. Those technicals are going to reach effective range of the platoon in about 3 minutes. When they do, those mounted guns are going to tear Alpha to pieces, so we don't let them get there. We stop them or we slow them from up here right now. A moving vehicle at this range is a hard shot, but I'm not shooting at the vehicle. I'm shooting at the men on the guns. I take out the gunners, the trucks lose their teeth. And a truck without a gun is just a truck, and Alpha can deal with a truck. Ma'am, those are moving targets at over a mile with mounted guns that'll be shooting back the second they see your muzzle flash and you've got a hole in your side. I know exactly what I've got, Emily said. Call the lead vehicle's speed and give me a lead. We're doing this. Every gunner I drop is 10 men down there who don't die. So we do it. Call the lead. Down in the ditch, Daniels had his platoon moving with brutal efficiency, positioning his few men to meet the assault, but he knew it wasn't enough, and every man in Alpha knew it wasn't enough. 3 technicals with heavy guns against what he had left was not a fight. It was an execution with extra steps. Chief Mitchell said, and his voice had gone strange, gone quiet, gone to a place past fear. Chief, we're not going to hold these, are we? Not 3 of them. Not with what we've got. We're going to hold what we can hold, Daniel said, and we're going to trust the woman on the ridge because she hasn't been wrong yet. You keep your head down and you keep grace in your heart and you let me worry about the rest. And then from the high ridge before the first technical even reached firing range, a shot rang out. And a mile up the valley, the man standing behind the mounted gun on the lead technical, the man who was seconds away from opening fire on the platoon, simply dropped, folding down into the truck bed, and the mounted gun swung uselessly toward the skandine. For a second, the lead technical faltered. The driver confused the truck, slewing. And then Emily's voice came over the net, flat and hard and certain. Alpha, this is Reaper. I just took the gunner off the lead truck. I'm working the other 2 now. You hold your positions and you engage those vehicles when they close, but the mounted guns are my job. I'm going to strip every one of those trucks of its teeth. You just handle what's left. Do you copy? Daniel stared up at the ridge, his mouth open. She had just shot a man off a moving truck at over a mile. A moving truck from a ridge with a hole in her side. Copy, Reaper, he managed. Strip their teeth. We'll handle the rest. God Almighty will handle the rest. Up on the ridge, Emily was in a rhythm now. A terrible, beautiful, impossible rhythm. And Wallace was matched to her, breath for breath, call for call. The 2 of them a single machine built for exactly this. Second truck gunner up, he's traversing toward the platoon. Lead him, ma'am. He's fast. I see him. Speed's holding full value right to left. Give him 3 widths. The rifle fired, and on the second technical, the gunner pitched backward off his mount and vanished. 2 trucks stripped. 1 to go, but the third technical's driver had seen his companion's gunners fall, had understood that death was coming from the high ridge, and he was smart, and he swung his truck hard, putting the bulk of the vehicle between his gunner and the ridge, shielding him. Third truck's using the vehicle as cover, Wallace said. He's smart. He's keeping the body of the truck between his gunner and us. You don't have an angle, ma'am. You don't have a shot. Then I'll make one, Emily said. He can hide the gunner behind the truck. He can't hide the truck. Wallace, the front tire. The driver's side front tire. If I blow it, that truck slews, and when it slews, it turns, and when it turns, that gunner's going to swing right out into the open for a second, and that second is mine. Call the tire. Ma'am, a tire at a mile moving. Call the tire, Wallace. He called it. She fired. And a mile away, the driver's side front tire of the third technical blew apart, and exactly as she'd said, the truck slewed hard, the driver fighting it, and the gunner in the back was thrown sideways out from behind his cover, exposed for 1 full second against the open sky. And Emily Carter was already cycling her bolt, already there, and the third gunner dropped like the 2 before him, and all 3 technicals were toothless now. 3 trucks full of fighters with no heavy guns to tear the platoon apart, just 3 trucks, and the men inside them and Men Alpha could fight. All 3 guns? Turn it down, Emily said into the net, and her voice cracked just slightly on the words. The effort of it, the pain in her side, the sheer impossible strain of what she'd just done showing through for half a second. Alpha the technicals are stripped. They've got no mounted guns left. Now they're just fighters in trucks, and you outnumber the ones in each vehicle. Engage them as they close. You can win this now. You can win this. Down in the ditch, Daniels felt something surge through the whole platoon over the net. A wild, fierce, disbelieving hope. Because 2 minutes ago, they'd been dead men, and now, because of the woman on the ridge, they had a fight they could actually win. You heard her, Daniels roared. Those trucks got no teeth left. They're just meat wagons now, and we are going to gut them. Vance your gun team on the lead vehicle, hit it the second it's in range. Everybody else pick your targets, controlled fire, make every round count, and we send these animals back the way they came. For Reyes, for Kowalski, for every second they had us on our bellies today. Let's end this. An Alpha platoon, which had lain frozen and helpless for 2 hours, rose up and fought. The lead technical came into range, and Vance's gun team opened up, raking it, and the truck shuddered and swerved and slammed into a rock and stopped dead, its fighters bailing out into a storm of Alpha's fire. The second truck tried to flank and ran straight into Foster and 2 others who'd repositioned exactly where Daniels had put them, and it turned into a killing ground. The third technical, its tire gone limping, its gunner dead, saw the slaughter of the other 2, and its driver made the only smart choice left, hauling the wheel around trying to run. Third truck's braking. He's running north, Wallace called. He's trying to run, ma'am. Emily watched the fleeing truck through her scope, and for a moment her finger rested on the trigger, and then she lifted it away. Let him go, she said quietly. Wallace looked at her surprised. Ma'am. Let him run. He's beaten. He's got no gun. He's got a shredded tire, and he's running away from the fight. If I kill him now, it's not to win the battle's won. It'd just be killing, and I've done enough killing today. She let out a slow breath. Let him go home and tell them what happened here. Let him tell them there's a ridge outside the Korangal you don't come back to. That's worth more than one more body. And so the third technical fled north, trailing dust and smoke. Its driver alive to carry the story, and behind it in the valley, the last of the fighting sputtered and died. An Alpha platoon stood among the wreckage of the reaction force, bloodied and battered, and alive gloriously, impossibly alive. For a long moment, there was only the sound of men breathing hard, and the tick of cooling engines, and the low groans of the wounded being tended. And then Daniels keyed the net, and his voice was thick. Reaper, this is Daniels. The technicals are down, 2 destroyed, 1 running north, and we let him run on your call. The valley is clear. Actually clear this time. Alpha is intact. We took casualties. We lost Reyes at the start, and we've got wounded, but we are alive, and we are going home, and every last one of us knows exactly who to thank. Over. Up on the ridge, Emily Carter let her rifle rest and let her head drop, and let herself feel for just a moment the full weight of everything she'd carried since dawn. The 3 snipers, the technicals, the 9 gunners and shooters she'd taken off the board, the men she'd saved, the ones she'd let run, the blood soaking into the bandage at her side. All of it. She let it come, and she held it the way she always did, and she did not break. Copy, Chief, she said. That's good work down there. That's damn good work. You held when it counted, and that's the only reason any of this worked. I couldn't have done it from up here if you hadn't held down there. Remember that. This wasn't one shooter on a ridge. This was all of us. Over. But Daniels, listening, heard something under her words that worried him, a thinness, a fading quality, and his instinct, that same 19-year-old instinct that had whispered the warning before the technicals came, whispered again now. Reaper, he said carefully, that wound, the one from the rock. How you doing up there? Give it to me straight. There was a pause, too long a pause. Reaper, Emily, answer me. I'm okay, Chief. But her voice had gone soft, and there was a slur at the edge of it now that hadn't been there before. It's been a long day. The side's bleeding a little more than I'd like. Wallace is on it. I'm okay. Up on the ridge, Wallace was not okay, and neither was the wound. In the frantic minutes of the technical assault, Emily had been shooting hard, twisting, working the bolt, and the movement had torn the rock wound wider, and the bandage was soaked through, and her face had gone gray. And Wallace saw with a cold spike of fear that she was bleeding more than a person could afford to bleed. Ma'am, this is bad, he said, working fast, tearing open another dressing. This opened up while you were on the guns. You've lost a lot of blood. Too much. I need to get you off this ridge and down to dock, and I need to do it now. After the platoon's secure, Emily murmured. Get them squared away first. They come first. No, not this time. Wallace's voice cracked with something between grief and fury. This time you come first. You've put every single person in this valley ahead of yourself all day long, and I've watched you do it, and it's been the bravest thing I've ever seen. But I am not going to sit up here and watch you bleed out on this ridge because you decided everybody else mattered more than you. So you're going to let me carry you down, and you're going to let Doc work on you. And for once in this whole godforsaken day, you are going to let somebody put you first. Do you understand me? Emily looked at him, and her gray face softened, and something in her eyes that had been locked down all day, all through the ghosts and the technicals and the impossible shots, finally loosened. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Wallace. Get me down. Down in the ditch, Daniels had heard enough of the net traffic and enough of the change in her voice to understand what was happening, and he was already moving, already climbing out of the ditch, already shouting orders. She's hurt bad, he called to Mitchell. The Overwatch. She's bleeding out, up on that ridge. Doc, get your kit. We've got a critical casualty on the high ridge. We need to get to her move. He turned to Mitchell. Can you walk? Can you make that climb? Mitchell was already on his feet, ignoring the leg that had been asleep for 2 hours, ignoring the pain, ignoring everything. I'm walking, Chief. I'm climbing that ridge if I have to crawl it. She saved my daughter's father. I'm getting to her. Let's go. And so it happened that the men of Alpha Platoon, who 2 hours before had been pinned helpless in the dirt begging for a miracle, now moved with everything they had left toward the high ridge, toward the woman who had been the miracle, racing the clock and the blood loss to reach her before it was too late. Doc led the way, Kit banging against his hip, and Daniels was right behind him. And Mitchell drove himself up the slope on a numb leg through sheer force of will. And behind them came Foster and Vance, and every man who could still walk, because none of them, not one, was going to let the woman who saved them die alone on a ridge. Up top, Wallace had gotten Emily onto his back, and he was carrying her down the reverse slope, moving as fast as he dared, talking to her the whole way, keeping her with him. Stay awake, ma'am. Talk to me. Tell me about Ohio. Tell me about your mother. Come on, stay with me. Tell me about the town outside Dayton. It's small, Emily murmured against his shoulder. It's real small. There's a diner. My mom, she waits tables there still. Won't quit. I keep telling her to quit, and she won't. A weak breath of a laugh. Stubborn, where I get it. That's good. Keep talking. Tell me more. What's the diner called? Wallace. Keep talking, ma'am, please. Wallace, if this goes bad, you tell my mom it was fast. Even if it isn't, you tell her it was fast, and it didn't hurt, and I wasn't scared. You lie to her, Wallace. You lie to her good. You're not going to make me lie to anybody, Wallace said fiercely, half blind, now himself stumbling down the slope with her on his back. Because you're going to tell her yourself. You're going to walk into that diner and tell her yourself. Now stop saying goodbye and stay with me. That's an order, ma'am. Do you hear me? I'm giving you an order for the first and only time in my life. Stay with me. And below them, coming up hard, Daniels and Doc and Mitchell and the whole battered platoon crested the reverse slope of the ridge and saw them. Saw Wallace carrying the wounded woman down toward them, and Doc broke into a dead run. I got her, Doc shouted. I got her. Set her down, easy, easy. Let me see the wound. They laid her down as gently as if she were made of glass. This woman none of them had ever met before today. This voice that had lived in their ears for 2 hours, and Doc's hands went to work fast and sure, and the whole platoon gathered around in a rough circle, and there was not a dry eye among them. These hardened men, because the person on the ground was the reason they were all still breathing. Emily's eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at the ring of faces above her, dirty and bloodied, and streaked with tears, faces she had never seen, but had spent all day keeping alive. And something moved across her gray features, something like wonder. You came, she whispered. You all came up here. For me. Daniels dropped to his knees beside her and took her hand, this chief who had spent 19 years being unbreakable, and his voice broke completely. Of course we came. You came for us. You think we were going to leave you up here? You think there's a man in this platoon who wouldn't climb this ridge 100 times for you? You saved every single one of us. Every one. We came for you. We're always going to come for you. And Mitchell pushed through the ring of men and fell to his knees on her other side. And he took her other hand and he pressed it to his chest over his heart. And he couldn't get any words out at all for a moment. And then he managed just one. Grace, he choked out. My daughter. Grace, she's going to know your name. I swear to you, she's going to grow up knowing your name. Emily looked at him, at this young man weeping over her hand, and she smiled, faint and gray, but real, and she squeezed his fingers with what little strength she had left. Grace, she whispered, that's a good name. That's a real good name. Her eyes started to drift closed. You tell her it was worth it. You tell her every second. Stay with us, Doc barked, working faster, his hands slick. Ma'am, stay with me. You are not doing this. Not after all that. Not now. Stay with me. And the platoon closed in tighter around her, this circle of men she had saved holding on to, her calling her back, refusing to let her go while high above them. At last, faint and growing, came the sound the whole valley had been praying for since dawn, the sound of aircraft inbound, the sound of the cavalry finally arriving 18 minutes too late to save the platoon, and just maybe in time to save the woman who already had. The aircraft came in low and fast over the ridge, and the sound of them rolled through the valley like thunder. And for the men gathered around Emily Carter, it was the most beautiful sound in the world because it meant help. It meant a medevac. It meant maybe they could get her out in time. Foster, Daniels barked without taking his eyes off Emily's gray face. Get on the net. Get me that medevac. Tell them we've got a critical casualty, gunshot, no laceration, severe blood loss, hypovolemic. We need a bird on this ridge yesterday. Go. Foster was already talking, his voice cracking with urgency, and Doc kept working, his hands pressed hard against the wound in Emily's side, his own arms shaking with the effort of holding back a tide he could feel slipping past him. She's losing too much, Doc said through his teeth, quiet enough that only Daniels heard. Chief, she's losing too much and too fast. That rock opened something up in there when she was twisting on those trucks. I can slow it, but I can't stop it. She needs a surgeon, and she needs blood, and she needs both of them in the next 20 minutes or we lose her. That's the truth. I'm not going to lie to you. Daniels closed his eyes for 1 second. 1 second was all he'd allow himself. Then he opened them, and he was the chief again, hard and clear. Then we get her that surgeon, whatever it takes. Foster, where's my bird? 10 minutes out, Chief, Foster called back. One of the escort aircraft's peeling off. There's a medevac bird right behind them. They're vectoring it to us now. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Doc's jaw tightened. 10 minutes was going to be close. 10 minutes might be too long. Emily's eyes drifted open again, and they were unfocused now, floating, but they found Mitchell, who still knelt, clutching her hand to his chest. Hey, she whispered. Hey, you, what's your name? Your real name, I never got it. I only ever heard Mitchell on the net. Ryan, he said, his voice breaking. It's Ryan Mitchell. Ryan. She said it slow, like she was tasting it, like she wanted to remember it. Ryan, you've got a little girl coming. Grace. Yeah, October. October. A faint smile. That's a good month. Cool weather. Leaves turning. Her eyes started to slip shut, and she forced them open again, dragging herself back. Ryan, listen. When she's born, when you're holding her, you're going to have this moment, this day, right here. It's going to try to come with you, the fear, the blood, all of it. It's going to try to sit in the room with you and your baby. Ma'am, don't talk, save your strength. No, this matters. Listen to Bayish. Her hand tightened on his with a strength that surprised him. You don't let it in the room. You hear me. When you hold Grace, this day stays outside. This day is mine. I'll carry it. You carry her. That's the deal. That's the whole deal. You leave the war on this ridge with me, and you take that baby home clean. Promise me. Mitchell was sobbing now openly, this 23-year-old warrior who'd held himself together through 2 hours of hell, coming apart completely over the hand of a dying woman. I promise, he choked. I promise. I'll leave it here. I'll take her home clean. I promise. Odd. Good, Emily breathed, and something eased in her face, some burden set down. Good boy, good. Daniels gripped her shoulder. Stay with us, Reaper. That bird's coming. You just hold on 10 more minutes. You held on all day. You can hold on 10 more minutes. That's nothing. That's easy. You've done 100 harder things today than lie here and breathe. Chief, her floating eyes found him. Mark, right? Mark Daniels. That's right, Mark. Mark, I need you to do something for me. Something important, more important than the bird. Anything, name it. Wallace. Her eyes searched and Wallace dropped down beside her, his face a wreck. There you are. Wallace, you were the best spotter I ever had. Best call of my life, that flash 10 o'clock dead tree. You called it perfect. You saved us all with that one call. You know that. Not me, you, I just pulled the trigger. You put me on him. We did it together, ma'am, Wallace said, barely able to speak. We did all of it together. Yeah, a whisper of a smile. Yeah, we did. Her gaze drifted back to Daniels. Mark, the thing I need. When the reports get written, when the medals get handed out, if they hand out any, I want it on the record that this wasn't me. This was the platoon. This was Vance putting a helmet up when I asked, even though it made no sense. This was Foster leaning over a wounded man and nearly dying for it. This was every man holding still for 2 hours when every nerve in his body screamed at him to run. This was Wallace calling a flash he had a half second to see. I was one rifle, but I was one rifle because 30 men down there did exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed it. You put that in the report. You don't let them make me a hero. You make all of us the story. Promise me that too. Daniel's throat worked. 19 years and he'd never heard a wounded warrior use what might be their last breath to give the credit away. I promise, he said. Every word. I'll put it all in. But you're going to be there to read it. You hear me? You're going to be standing right there when they read it out loud because you are not dying on this ridge. Doc, where are we? Holding, Doc said, sweat pouring down his face. Barely. Come on, ma'am. Stay with me. Stay awake. Keep those eyes open. But Emily's eyes were getting harder to keep open, and everyone in that circle could see it, and the fear that had been held at bay came flooding into every face because they were watching the person who had saved them slip away, and there was nothing any of them could do but hold her hands and call her name. And then Emily did something none of them expected. She started to talk low and steady in the flat, calm command voice she'd used on the net all day, the voice that had held them together through the worst hours of their lives. All stations, this is Reaper, she said softly, her eyes closed now. Listen up. I need you to do exactly what I say. I need every man in this platoon to walk out of this valley today. All of you, that's the mission. That's the only mission that was ever the mission. You get your wounded loaded. You bring your dead home. You bring Reyes home. You don't leave him. And you walk out of here together. Every one of you. And you go home to whoever's waiting. You go home to the diners and the daughters and the mothers who wait tables and won't quit. Her voice was fading, but the men leaned in, hanging on every word. That's an order. Everybody goes home. Everybody goes home. Daniels repeated, his voice shaking. Copy, Reaper. Everybody goes home, including you. You're coming with us. That's part of the order now, and you don't get to argue with your own order. A ghost of a laugh crossed her lips. Sneaky, Chief. I learned from the best. 2 hours of watching you outthink the whole valley. Now, hold on. That bird's almost here. I can hear it. Can you hear it? Listen. And they could all hear it now. The medevac bird cresting the ridge, its rotors beating the air. And Doc was up and waving, guiding it in, and men were moving, clearing a landing, and hope surged through the circle like electricity. You hear that? Daniel said, gripping her hand hard. That's for you. That whole bird came all this way just for you. So you hold on, and you let them take you, and you let them fix you up, and someday you come find us. You come find Alpha Platoon. You come find Ryan Mitchell and his little girl Grace. Because there's going to be a birthday party in about 17 years where a girl named Grace blows out her candles, and there's going to be an empty chair at that party unless you're in it. You hear me? That chair is yours. It's got your name on it. Don't you dare make it stay empty. Emily's eyes opened one more time, and this time they found his, and for a moment they were clear and warm and fully present. And she looked at Mark Daniels, and she smiled. A birthday party, she whispered, for Grace in 17 years. That's right. I'd like that, Chief. Her eyes drifted toward Mitchell. Ryan, save me a seat. It's yours, Mitchell wept. It's always going to be yours. Front row, right next to Grace. I swear to God. And then the medevac was down and the medics were pouring out and they took over from Doc and they got a line into her and blood flowing and they lifted her onto the litter with a gentleness that belied their speed and the platoon parted to let them through. But every man reached out as she passed to touch her shoulder, her arm, the edge of the litter. Anything this woman who had walked into a duel with ghosts alone and won it for all of them. And as they carried her toward the bird, Emily Carter Gray, and fading but still impossibly holding on, lifted one hand and she found Mitchell in the crowd. And she made a small gesture, cradling, rocking the universal shape of holding a baby, and she mouthed one word, Grace. And Mitchell nodded, sobbing, cradling the empty air back at her, promising, promising, promising. The bird lifted off the ridge in a storm of dust, carrying her away up and out over the valley she had ruled all day. And the men of Alpha Platoon stood on that ridge and watched it go. Watched it until it was a speck, and then nothing, and not one of them said a word because there were no words. Because how do you speak in the presence of what they had just witnessed? Finally, Daniels turned to his platoon, his battered, bloodied, weeping, living platoon, and he found his voice. You heard her last order, he said. Everybody goes home, so let's make it happen. Get the wounded ready to move. Bring Reyes. We don't leave anybody. We walk out of this valley together exactly like she said, and we live exactly like she ordered because that's how we honor what she did up here today. We live. All of us, every single one. Now let's move. And they moved. They gathered their wounded and their dead, and they formed up, and they began the long walk out of the valley, out of the place that had almost been their tomb, and every man of them carried a new thing in his heart that he would carry for the rest of his life. The memory of a calm voice on a high ridge and the woman it belonged to. But as they walked, Foster came up beside Daniels, the radio still pressed to his ear, and his face had gone strange, and Daniels felt that old whisper move in the back of his mind one more time. Chief, Foster said quietly, the medevac. They're on the net. They're asking for us. Daniels took the handset, his heart in his throat, because there was only one reason a medevac would call back so soon, and it could be the best reason or the worst reason in the world. This is Alpha Actual, he said, and his voice was not steady. Go ahead, send it. And every man within earshot stopped walking and stood still on the valley floor and held his breath and waited to hear whether the woman from Ohio, the woman who had told them all to go home, was going to make it home herself. This is Alpha Actual. Go ahead, send it. The seconds before the answer came were the longest of Mark Daniels' life, longer than the 2 hours in the ditch, longer than the whole terrible day, because everything hung on the next voice that came out of that handset. Alpha Actual, this is a medevac. Be advised. A pause, and Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Your casualty is stable. I say again, your casualty is stable. We got blood into her in time. Her pressure's coming back up. She's fighting Alpha. This one's a fighter. She's going to make it to the surgical unit, and she's going to make it, period. She wanted us to relay something to you. She said, and I'm quoting her here, tell Alpha the order still stands. Everybody goes home, her included. How copy over? For a moment, Daniels couldn't speak. He stood there in the middle of that valley with the handset pressed to his ear, and the words washed over him. Stable fighting gonna make it, and something that had been clenched tight in his chest since dawn finally let go. Copy medevac, he managed, and his voice cracked wide open on it. Copy all. You tell her the order stands. You tell her Alpha copies. You tell her we'll see her at the party. She'll know what it means. Alpha out. He lowered the handset, and he turned to his platoon, his men standing frozen in the valley waiting on the news, and he saw 30 faces staring at him. 30 men who had been dead this morning and were alive tonight. And he opened his mouth, and what came out was not a word, but a sound, a great broken shout of pure joy, and he threw his fist into the air. She's gonna make it, he roared. You hear me? She's gonna make it. She's stable, she's fighting, she's gonna make it, and the order still stands. Everybody goes home. And the valley that had been silent with dread erupted. Men who had held themselves rigid for 2 hours, men who had wept over her hand on the ridge, men who had watched that bird carry her away, not knowing if they would ever hear her voice again, broke into shouts and cheers and sobs of relief, grabbing each other, pounding each other's backs, some laughing and some crying, and most doing both at once. Mitchell fell to his knees right there in the dirt, both hands over his face. His whole body shaking, and Wallace dropped down and grabbed him and held on, and the two of them just held on to each other while the sound of the platoon's joy rolled up the valley walls. "She made it, Ryan," Wallace said, gripping the back of Mitchell's neck. "She made it. She's going to be at the party. She's going to meet Grace." "She's going to meet Grace," Mitchell repeated over and over like a prayer, like he couldn't believe he was allowed to say it. "She's going to meet Grace. She's going to meet my little girl." Daniels let them have their moment, let the whole platoon have it, this pure, clean joy they had earned 100 times over. And then, because he was the chief, because there was still a job to finish, he pulled them back together gently, the way you wake someone from a good dream. "All right," he called, and his voice was thick but steady. "All right, listen up. We got what we needed. Now we finish it. We got wounded to carry, and we got a brother to bring home. So we form up, and we walk out of this valley together, and we do it the way she'd want us to do it. Sharp. Together. Nobody left behind. Let's honor what she did up here by walking out of here like the platoon she saved. Move out." And they did. They lifted their wounded with a tenderness born of everything they'd survived, and 4 of them lifted Corporal Reyes, who had died in the first 30 seconds of the ambush, without ever knowing what hit him. And they carried him at the front at the place of honor, and they began the long walk out. And as they walked, the valley behind them fell into a silence that was different from any silence it had held all day. Not the silence of death waiting, not the silence of ghosts hiding, the silence of a place that had been the site of something that men would tell their grandchildren about going quiet at last, as the ones who had survived it walked away into the fading light. The story of what happened in that valley traveled fast the way the true ones always do. By the time Alpha Platoon reached the fire base, it was already ahead of them, passing from radio operator to radio operator, from unit to unit, growing in the telling the way legends do. A SEAL sniper on a high ridge, a coordinated enemy cell that everyone had called unstoppable. 3 impossible shots, a reaction force stripped of its guns, 1 gunner at a time. A woman who bled out on a ridge, refusing to be saved until every man in the valley was clear. Some of the details got exaggerated the way they do, but the heart of it was true, and everyone who heard it knew it was true, because some stories carry the weight of truth in a way you can feel. But Emily Carter, when she finally came around in the surgical unit 2 days later, stitched and transfused and weak as a kitten, did not want to hear any of it. "No," she said to the young officer who came to her bedside with talk of commendations and press interest and the word hero. "No, absolutely not. I want that stopped." "Ma'am, with respect, what you did out there." "What I did out there," Emily said, and even flat on her back, drained and pale. Her voice had that same quiet iron it had carried over the net all day. "Was pull a trigger 9 times. That's all I did. You want to talk about what happened in that valley? You go talk to the corporal who put a helmet on a stick when I asked him to, knowing it might draw fire into his own position. You go talk to the radio man who leaned over a wounded man and nearly took a round to the skull for it. You go talk to the 30 men who held perfectly still for 2 hours when every instinct they had was screaming at them to run, because holding still was the only thing that kept me able to work. You go talk to my spotter who called a muzzle flash he had half a second to see and put me on the last shooter and saved every life on that ridge, including mine. You want a hero, you've got 30 of them, and I'm just the one who happened to be holding the rifle. You put that in your report. You put all of them in it, not me. Or you put nobody in it. Those are your choices." The young officer stared at her for a long moment, and then slowly he closed his folder. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "I'll put all of them in it." "Good," Emily said and closed her eyes. "Now let me sleep. I've had a long couple of days." She recovered. It took time, and there were surgeries, and there was a long stretch where she couldn't lift her arm the way she used to. And there were nights she lay awake with the whole valley playing behind her eyes. The ghosts and the gunners and the men she'd killed and the ones she'd saved, because that was the price of it. That was always the price. And she paid it the way she'd paid every price, quietly alone, without letting it touch the parts of her that other people needed. But she recovered. And in time, she went home, back to the small town outside Dayton, back to the diner where her mother still waited tables and still wouldn't quit. And she walked in the door one afternoon, and her mother dropped a tray of coffee cups when she saw her. And the 2 of them held each other in the middle of that diner for a long, long time while the whole place went quiet around them. And the story might have ended there the way most war stories do, with a soldier come home and a chapter closed, and the men she'd saved scattered to the winds of their own lives, remembering her sometimes on quiet nights with a kind of ache. It might have ended there, but it didn't, because of a promise, because of a seat that had a name on it. 17 years is a long time. Long enough for a war to end and the men who fought it to become fathers, and then some of them grandfathers. Long enough for Ryan Mitchell to leave the Navy and marry Sarah and raise a daughter in a small house with a yard and coach her soccer team and teach her to drive and lie awake worrying about her the way fathers do. Long enough for the fear he'd promised to leave on that ridge to stay there mostly the way he'd sworn it would. So that Grace grew up in a home that was clean of the war exactly as a dying woman on a ridge had made him promise all those years ago in a country on the other side of the world. But there was one thing Ryan Mitchell never let go of across all those 17 years. One name, one seat always saved. And so it was that on an October afternoon in the backyard of that small house, at a table set with the cake and 17 candles surrounded by family and friends, and a handful of men who had grown gray and thick, but who still stood a little straighter when they were together, Grace. Amber Mitchell turned 17, and there was one chair at that table that had sat empty at every one of her birthdays for as long as she could remember, a chair her father always sat, a chair he never let anyone else sit in. And when she'd asked him as a little girl why the chair was always empty, he'd only ever said, "That seat belongs to someone. She'll come when she's ready. We keep it for her." And on this October afternoon, on her 17th birthday, the gate at the side of the house opened, and a woman walked into the yard. She was older now. Her hair had gone gray at the temples, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there in a valley near the Korengal, and she moved with a slight favoring of one side at an old wound that ached in the cold. But her eyes were the same, calm, steady, reading the yard the way she'd once read a battlefield, though there was nothing to read here but a family and a cake and a girl about to make a wish. Ryan Mitchell saw her, and he went absolutely still, and the color drained from his face and then flooded back, and his eyes filled, and he rose from his chair so fast it fell over behind him. "Emily," he said, just her name. He couldn't manage anything else. And Emily Carter looked across that yard at the man who had been a terrified 23-year-old, in a blood-soaked ditch at the man who had wept over her hand on a ridge and promised to save her a seat, and she smiled the same faint, steady smile she'd smiled at him all those years ago. "You saved me a seat," she said. The whole yard had gone silent. Nobody understood, not yet, not the guests, not the friends, but they could all feel that they were standing in the middle of something, some current running between these two people that was older and deeper than anything in that ordinary backyard. And then Grace, 17 years old today, stood up from her place at the head of the table, and she looked at this gray-haired woman her father had gone pale at the sight of, and something moved across her face, some dawning understanding, because she had grown up with a name, hadn't she? She had grown up knowing a name the way some children grow up knowing a prayer. "You're her," Grace said softly. "You're the one from the ridge, the one my dad. You're Emily. You're the woman who saved my father." And Emily Carter looked at this girl, this 17-year-old with her whole clean, unburdened life ahead of her. This girl who existed, who got to exist because 30 men held still in a valley, and a spotter called a flash, and a trigger got pulled at exactly the right instant 17 years ago. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily Carter felt her own eyes sting. "Grace," she said. And her voice, the flat, calm voice that had held a whole platoon together through the worst day of their lives, wavered just for a moment, just for her. "Grace Amber Mitchell, your father told me your name before you were even born, in a ditch, on the worst day of his life. He held on to your name like it was the only thing keeping him alive. And it was. You were the reason he didn't quit. You, a name, a little girl who wasn't even born yet." She stepped closer. "I've thought about you for 17 years. I didn't even know what you'd look like. But I thought about you on the hard nights, when it all came back. I'd think there's a girl named Grace out there, and she's alive and she's got a father because of what we all did that day. And that was enough. That always got me through." Ryan Mitchell came around the table then, and he took Emily Carter in his arms. This hardened man, this father, and he held her the way you hold someone you thought you'd lost, and he wept without shame into her shoulder. And she held him back, and the two of them stood there in the middle of the yard while 17 years of distance collapsed into nothing at all. "You came," Ryan said. You actually came. I never knew if you would. Every year I set the chair. Every single year. And Sarah, she'd ask me, is she ever going to come? And I'd say, I don't know, but the seat stays the seat, always stays. And you came. I always meant to come, Emily said. I needed to be ready, to see it, to see what we saved. I needed to be strong enough to sit at that table and look at a living, breathing 17-year-old and not fall apart. And this year I finally was. She pulled back and looked at him, and she smiled through her tears. So here I am, to claim my seat. And then Chief Mark Daniels Gray, now heavier, retired these many years, rose from his own place at the table. Because of course he was there, of course he was, and Wallace beside him, and Foster, and Vance, and Doc, the ones who were still living. The brothers who had made the pilgrimage to this backyard every October for 17 years to watch a girl named Grace grow up because she was theirs too. In a way, she was all of theirs. Reaper, Daniel said, and his old chief's voice broke on it. You made it to the party. I made it to the party, Chief, Emily said. The order stood. Everybody went home. Even me. Everybody went home, Daniels repeated, and he crossed the yard and gripped her hand, the same hand he'd held on the ridge 17 years before, thinking it might be the last time. Even you. And Grace Amber Mitchell looked around the yard at these gray-haired men, weeping openly at her father, at the woman whose name she'd carried her whole life, and something enormous settled over her, some understanding of the weight of her own existence, of all the things that had to go exactly right in a valley on the other side of the world for her to be standing here today, 17 years old, alive, loved on an ordinary October afternoon. And she walked over to that empty chair, the chair that had been saved for 17 years, and she pulled it out and she looked at Emily Carter, and she said the words her father had taught her. Without ever quite explaining the words, she now finally understood. This seat's been yours since before I was born, Grace said. Please, sit down. You're home. And Emily Carter, the woman they said couldn't be stopped by an enemy, who couldn't be stopped, the woman who had walked into a duel with ghosts alone and walked out on her own 2 feet, the woman who had given away every ounce of credit and carried every ounce of the weight, sat down at last in the seat that had waited for her for 17 years at a table full of the living, in the presence of the girl whose name had been a lifeline in a ditch, and she was home. Grace made her wish that day with all of them gathered close, and she blew out her 17 candles, and nobody ever knew what she wished for because that's how wishes work. But Ryan Mitchell always suspected. He always suspected that his daughter on her 17th birthday, with the woman who saved her father finally sitting in the seat that bore her legacy, had wished for nothing at all, because for the first time in her father's life and in the lives of every man at that table, there was nothing left in the world to wish for. They had all gone home, every single one of them, just like she ordered. And that is the whole story. Not a story about an unstoppable enemy because the enemy was stopped. Not a story about invincible ghosts because the ghosts fell one by one to a woman who was afraid the entire time and did the work anyway. It is a story about what a calm mind can do when everyone else has given in to fear. It is a story about the 30 men who held still, and the one who called the flash, and the one who pulled the trigger, and the promise that outlived a war. It is a story about a seat at a table kept empty for 17 years, and the woman who finally came home to fill it. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is a steady hand while the heart is pounding. It is not strength that saves us, and it is not numbers. It is precision and patience, and the refusal to break while everything breaks around you. Emily Carter proved that in a valley near the Korengal against an enemy the world called unstoppable, and she proved it again 17 years later in an ordinary backyard, sitting down at last in a seat with her name on it. They said those enemy snipers could not be beaten. She beat them, and every single soul in that valley went home. Sao có 3.000 từ bạn nói đúng phần 5 vẫn chưa đủ 7.000 đến 7.500 từ. Tôi viết tiếp phần bổ sung để hoàn thiện nối liền mạch ngay sau khoảnh khắc Emily ngồi xuống chiếc ghế của mình, và câu chuyện lắng lại đào sâu thêm cảm xúc và những mảnh ghép còn thiếu để đủ dung lượng. But before that October afternoon, before the backyard and the candles and the seat finally filled, there were 17 years of quiet that nobody at that table ever spoke about out loud, and it is worth telling what happened in the space between, because the space between is where the real story of a person lives. For Ryan Mitchell, the years after the valley were not simple. He came home from that deployment, and he held his daughter for the first time in a hospital room in October exactly as promised. And he did the thing Emily Carter had made him swear to do on the ridge. He left the war outside the room. He looked down at Grace Amber Mitchell, 7 pounds, and screaming, imperfect, and he felt the whole valley try to come into that room with him, the blood and the ghosts and the fear. And he stood in the doorway of his own heart, and he did not let it in. This day is mine, Emily had told him. I'll carry it. You carry her. And so he carried Grace and Emily wherever she was carried, the ditch. But leaving the war outside the room did not mean the war left him. There were nights in those early years when Ryan would wake up with his heart slamming and his hands cold back in the ditch, back in the silence between the shots, and Sarah would wake beside him and put her hand on his chest and say his name until he came back. And every single time without fail, the thing that brought him all the way back was not his wife's voice, though he loved it. It was a memory. A flat, calm voice on a radio saying, I've got you, that's all. Hold still and trust me. 17 years and on his worst nights, it was still Emily Carter's voice that reached down into the dark and pulled Ryan Mitchell back into the world of the living. He tried to find her in those early years. He wrote letters that came back. He made calls that went nowhere. The military moves people and it protects the privacy of its operators. And a Navy SEAL sniper is not an easy person to track down when she does not want to be found. And Emily, it turned out, did not want to be found. Not because she didn't care, because she cared too much. Because she knew that if she let herself get close to the men she'd saved, if she sat in their kitchens and held their babies and let herself become part of their lives, then she would have to carry not just the weight of what she'd done in that valley, but the weight of everything that came after every anniversary, every hard night, every reminder. And she was already carrying so much. So she stayed away. And she set it down where she could see it, but where it couldn't touch her, exactly the way she'd once told Wallace she set down the weight of a shot, and she waited until she was strong enough to pick it back up. Mark Daniels understood this better than the others. He was older and he'd carried more. And he knew what it cost a person to be the one who made the impossible calls. In the years after the valley, as he moved toward retirement, he found himself thinking about Emily Carter, more than he thought about almost anyone from his long career, and it took him a while to understand why. And then one day it came to him. It was because she had shown him at the very end of 19 years something he thought he'd already known everything about. She had shown him what real command looked like, not the shouting, not the medals, the willingness to spend yourself, all of yourself, and to give the credit away, and to carry the weight alone, and to do it not for glory, but simply because it was right, and because there were men who needed it done. Daniels had spent 19 years learning to be a chief, and in one afternoon, a woman on a ridge had taught him what he'd been trying to learn the whole time. So Daniels was the one who kept them together in those 17 years. He was the one who organized the reunions, who made the phone calls, who tracked down Foster when he moved, and Vance when he fell on hard times and pulled him back up. He was the one who made sure that every October the men of Alpha Platoon who could make it gathered in Ryan Mitchell's backyard for a little girl's birthday, because Daniels had understood something the day they walked out of that valley. He had understood that Grace was not just Mitchell's daughter. She was the proof. She was the living, breathing evidence that what they had done that day had mattered, that all the fear and blood and loss had bought something real, something that got to grow up and laugh and blow out candles. And so every year they came, these gray-haired warriors, to watch the proof get a year older and to remember and to keep alive the empty chair and the name that went with it. It was Daniels who found Emily in the end. Not through the military, through the diner. He'd remembered all those years what she'd said on the ridge when she thought she was dying about a mother in a small town outside Dayton who waited tables and wouldn't quit. And on the 16th anniversary, feeling his own years catching up to him. Feeling the weight of time, Mark Daniels got in his car and he drove to Ohio, and he found a small town and he found a diner. And he walked in and sat down at the counter, and an older woman came to take his order, and he looked at her eyes and he knew. "You're Emily's mother," he said quietly. The woman went still, the coffee pot halfway to his cup. "Who's asking?" "My name's Mark Daniels. Your daughter saved my life 17 years ago this October in a valley on the other side of the world. Her and 30 other people, but she was the one holding the rifle." His voice thickened. "I've been trying to find her for a long time. I've got a message for her, and I've got an invitation." Emily's mother set down the coffee pot. Her hands were shaking. "She doesn't talk about it," she said. "She never has. 17 years, and she's never once told me what happened over there. All I know is she came home different, quieter, carrying something. I know exactly what she's carrying, Daniel said. I helped put some of it on her. And I came to tell her she doesn't have to carry it alone. There's a whole platoon of us that's been carrying it right alongside her this whole time. She just didn't know it. She thought she had to keep her distance to protect herself. But we've been holding a seat for her at a table for 17 years, and it's time she came and sat in it. And Emily's mother, who had watched her daughter come home from war, carrying a weight she would not name, who had spent 17 years wishing she could help and not knowing how, looked at this gray-haired stranger and began quietly to cry. "Tell me about the seat," she said. "Tell me everything." So Daniels told her. He told her about the ditch and the ghosts and the impossible shots. He told her about a young man named Ryan who held on to the name of his unborn daughter like a lifeline, and how Emily had told the whole platoon that his baby was worth her life. He told her about the reaction force and the stripped guns and the third truck she let run because she'd done enough killing. He told her about the ridge and the blood, and how 30 men climbed up to reach her rather than leave her to die alone, and how she'd used what she thought were her last breaths to give the credit away and order every man home. And he told her about the chair empty for 17 years and the girl named Grace, who was about to turn 17, and the promise that had been kept all that time waiting. And Emily's mother listened to all of it weeping, and when Daniels was done, she wiped her eyes and she said, "She's off today. She's at her place out past the edge of town. I'll take you to her. But Mr. Daniels—" "Yes, ma'am." "You be gentle with her. She looks strong. She's always looked strong. But she's my baby, and she came home from that place with something broken in her that never quite healed, and I've spent 17 years watching her hold it together with her bare hands. So you be gentle." "Ma'am," Daniel said, "there is not a person alive I would be more gentle with. She earned that from me a long time ago." And that was how it happened. That was how 17 years after a valley near the Korengal, Mark Daniels came to be standing on the porch of a small house at the edge of a small town in Ohio, and how the door opened, and how Emily Carter Gray at the temples, now favoring one side, looked out and saw her old chief standing there, and how her calm, steady face crumpled for just a moment before she got it back under control. "Chief," she said. "Reaper," he said, "I found you. You found me." She leaned against the doorframe, and something in her seemed to sag 17 years of distance and self-protection and carrying it all alone, finally cracking just a little. "I always knew somebody would eventually. I always kind of hoped it'd be you. Can I come in?" "Yeah, Chief," she said softly. "Yeah, come in." They talked for hours that day, the two of them, the way old warriors do, circling the hard things and then finally landing on them. Daniels told her about the years, about the men, about Ryan and Sarah, and the small house with the yard. And when he told her about the chair, the seat kept empty for 17 years, the seat with her name on it, Emily Carter, who had not cried in front of another human being since before the valley put her face in her hands and wept. "He kept a seat for me," she said, "for 17 years. That boy from the ditch, he kept a seat. He never gave up on you," Daniel said. "None of us did. We just didn't know how to reach you. But we never gave up. Every October, that chair was there. And every October, Ryan would look at the gate hoping, 17 years, Emily." He reached across and put his weathered hand over hers. "It's time to come home. Grace turns 17 next month. And there's a seat that's been waiting for you since before she was born. Come sit in it, please. Let us love you the way you let us live. That's all we've ever wanted, to thank you. To have you at the table. Come home." And Emily Carter, who had spent 17 years believing she had to carry it alone, who had stayed away to protect herself from a weight she thought would crush her if she ever let it close, looked at her old chief and finally understood. She had been wrong. The weight was never hers alone to carry. It had always belonged to all of them, the whole platoon, the whole valley. 30 men and one girl who wasn't even born yet. And they had been carrying it right alongside her this entire time, waiting for her to let them. Waiting for her to come sit at the table and set it down among the people who understood. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Chief, I'll come. I'll come home." And she did. On an October afternoon in the backyard of a small house, she walked through the gate and she claimed her seat, and she met the girl named Grace, and 17 years of distance collapsed into nothing at all. But there was one more thing to tell, one last moment that mattered more than all the rest. And it happened after the candles were blown out and the cake was cut and the guests who didn't understand had drifted home when it was just the old platoon and the family sitting in the gathering evening around the table. Grace pulled her chair close to Emily's, this 17-year-old girl, and this 50-something woman who had never met before that day, but who were bound together tighter than most people who spend a lifetime side by side. And Grace said quietly, so only Emily could hear, "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me it's none of my business." "Ask me anything," Emily said. "Were you scared that day in the valley when you were doing all those impossible things and saving all those people? Were you scared?" And Emily Carter looked at this girl and she remembered a promise she'd made on a ridge 17 years ago, a promise to a spotter named Wallace that someday she wanted somebody to know the truth. And she realized that this was the moment. This was who she'd been saving it for. "Grace," she said, "I was scared out of my mind every single second. From the first ghost I found to the last shot I took to lying on that ridge bleeding, thinking I might never see my mother again. I was terrified the entire time. People think I wasn't. People think I was made of ice. I wasn't. I was so afraid I could barely breathe." She leaned in close. "And I want you to know that, and I want you to carry it, because someday you're going to face something that scares you so bad you can't breathe. Everybody does eventually. And when that day comes, I want you to remember that the woman your father saved a seat for was terrified the whole time she was doing the bravest thing she ever did. Because courage was never about not being afraid, Grace. Courage is being afraid and doing the work anyway. It's a steady hand and a pounding heart. Both at once. That's the secret. That's the only secret there is. And now it's yours." Grace Amber Mitchell looked at Emily Carter with eyes gone wide and bright, and she nodded slowly, and she took the secret and she folded it away in her heart where she would keep it for the rest of her life and pass it on someday to a child of her own, perhaps on some far October evening Emily would never see. And Ryan Mitchell, watching his daughter and the woman who saved him, leaned close together in the fading light, sharing something he could not hear, but could feel understood that the promise was finally fully kept. He had brought his daughter home clean. He had kept the war outside the room. And now, 17 years later, the woman who'd made him swear to it was sitting in his backyard whole and gray and home, passing her hard-won wisdom to the very girl whose name had been her reason to fight. The circle was closed. Everything in that valley had broken was mended. Everything it had scattered was gathered back in, and every soul it had almost taken was here alive, at one table in the soft October dusk. Mark Daniels raised his glass then, and the table went quiet, and the old chief looked around at all of them, the living and the loved, the saved and the savior. And he found his voice one last time. 17 years ago, he said, "We were dead men in a ditch, every one of us, and the world said the people hunting us couldn't be stopped. They said those snipers were ghosts, unstoppable. And then a woman on a ridge who was scared the whole time decided that unstoppable was just a word, and she stopped them. All of them. And she brought us home. Every single one." His voice broke and he let it. "So here's to Emily Carter. Not because she wasn't afraid, because she was, and she did it anyway. Here's to the woman who gave the credit away and carried the weight alone for 17 years until we finally got her to set it down. Here's to the seat that's not empty anymore. And here's to going home. All of us. Every single one." And they drank, these warriors and this family, in the gold October light, and Emily Carter sat in the seat that had waited 17 years for her, with a girl named Grace on one side, and her old chief on the other, home at last, whole at last, the weight set down at last among the only people on earth who could help her carry it. They said those enemy snipers could not be stopped. They were wrong. She stopped them one by one with a pounding heart and a steady hand and a might like still water. And in the end, every soul she fought for that day walked out of that valley alive and came home and stayed home and gathered around one table 17 years later to prove that what she did had mattered, that it would always matter, that it would echo down through a girl named Grace and her children and her children's children long after all of them were gone. Not strength, not numbers, precision and patience, and the courage to be afraid and do the work anyway. That is what saved them. That is what she taught them. And that is a truth that will never, ever be stopped.